This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1875. Maybe just go watch Andor instead.
Tell what season we're all in. Everybody's all bundled up.
Oh, no, this is my awesome season. It was cold the other day and rained. I was in hog heaven.
Oh, shut up.
Give me both.
That was awesome.
Whoa.
I was here working. I could hear the rain start to hit the roof, and I was in a meeting like, oh my God, guys, it's raining. And everybody at my work knows that I'm crazy for when it rains. So they were making fun of me, but I don't care.
Snow soon.
I don't need the snow. I like.
You're gonna go up to Buffalo, Kevin, tonight before the snow starts, so you can get the 5 feet of snow that they're expected to get.
5 feet.
5 feet.
Holy cow!
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
They've already shut down half of upstate New York. That whole area, highways are already maybe not right now, but they've announced that they will be closing basically every major road. Everybody just has to stay home.
Wow.
They moved the Bills football game to Detroit for Sunday.
Yeah, I did see that. Well, they have the equipment. I know. When I first moved into my apartment in the mid-'90s, there was a couple that lived above me, and they were from Rochester and Buffalo, and that's when the next year we ended up having that 3-foot snow when I was living in West Lawn there, and I got to talking to them, and they were telling me the equipment they had to remove snow up there is ridiculous. When they were
Plus they can dump it right in the lake, so it's easier to get rid of. And
them getting 5 feet is like us getting 3 feet. I mean, it probably shut down for 2 days. That's awesome, though. I long for those days. Last year down here, we only got 2 accumulating snowstorms, and it was only about 1.5 inches, and they're both gone in a day. I was like, that's why I kept telling you, your Virginians are disappointing winners.
I'm all for it. I want to be trapped for 5 days in my house.
I know, dude. That's why we went up to my friend's dad's place up in Wintergreen, which was up in the mountains, a ski resort in the middle of Virginia. And at the end of March, because they sold the place, so we went up there the last weekend before they turned it over. And I said, oh man, I hope, I would love to just get snowed in, you're at 4,000 or 5,000 elevation up in the, and I woke up the last day we were there and we got an inch of snow, which was unexpected. We weren't supposed to get anything, but at least I got a taste of what it looked like up there. But I can only imagine. I just think about being up there, getting 2 foot of snow, have the fireplace going and just camp out.
Yeah, I think Carlene and I have been married 26 years, and we have yet to ever have such a snowstorm that we're snowed in.
What?
Where everything's shut down, can't work, can't do anything because it's just it's that bad. The closest was the pandemic, being told to stay home, but never a whole big snowstorm like that.
There was one in 2004 or something where there was one day where it was illegal to drive because I was working in Allentown and they didn't get as much snow in Allentown. And my boss was like, when are you coming in? I'm like, did you not hear? I'm literally not allowed to leave Berks County. It's illegal for me to get on the road because I'm not a nurse or a doctor. So I'm staying home. And they were so pissed. It was like, look, I didn't pass the emergency law.
Yes.
What do you
I guess I'm looking for 2 to 3 days being snowed in.
Well, you had, last March, not this past March, but 2021, we had a 20-inch snow that one time. Because I remember I took tarps and built a system with ladders and stuff and tented my van and my car out in the driveway. And so I didn't have to clean off all the vehicles.
Well, I think as much as I absolutely love the capabilities we have to work from home and do things like that, I think in the snow day world, that's also the negative, because during that snow, I probably was able to log in and work, and that's what happened, rather than if the internet went down, I couldn't do anything. Not that I need everything to just die forever, but just a 3-day weekend of snow would be good.
Snowpocalypse.
Yeah, just a mini apocalypse. Being snowed in just for a little bit would be all right.
Pants, happy belated birthday.
Why, thank you. I can no longer yell 52 plus 1 now.
That's a good way to do it.
Such problems.
Did you do anything? Did you celebrate?
No. Actually, well, that was the night I went to go see Black Panther. So I got that, and I got my free popcorn and soda at the movie theater. For my birthday.
Nice, nice.
So yay!
Good heavens, I totally missed that. I'm sorry. Happy birthday.
No worries. I don't post it much anymore because I hate getting old.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Both of you.
Let me. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when we were talking about snow, and we're gonna talk about a John Byrne comic, but it makes me think of that classic Alpha Flight cover, Snowblind, where it's just all white with that female character
space
in the middle.
Yeah, Snowbird.
Yeah. So that's where my brain went.
Sure.
Bring it back to comics,
And then they made fun of that. I don't know if they made fun of that particular issue, but in there was like an issue, or no, it was What If, but it was the humor issue of What If, where they said, what if Wendigo fought?
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
And then it was just all white.
It was all white.
Yeah, it was all white, yeah.
And then the second panel was like, what if, I don't know, Black Panther fought the Shroud in a coal mine, and it was all But they made fun of, they didn't make fun of, but they talked about that issue. And then they also talked about, wasn't there another issue? I don't know if Byrne did it or whatever, where he told the story that there was no words in a particular issue. I don't think it was the G.I. Joe issue. I think it was a Marvel issue. And he said a letterer actually submitted a voucher for that issue, even though there was multiple pages of no lettering.
No lettering.
But I guess the point was, well, why should I not get paid if I'm purposely let out of the project or something?
Yeah, right.
I don't remember what the whole story. I'm sure somebody would know.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That cover, though, I feel like that's an iconic classic cover, right? Like anybody from our age group, that cover.
Yeah.
I didn't read Alpha Flight, but that's a cover that sticks out. It was very clear on the shelf, right?
Yeah. Very poignant.
Yeah.
That's a good run. I mean, the first his run. I know I read somewhere that he's not particularly fond of that run. Like maybe it didn't, I don't know, come out the way he wanted it or something like that. But for a team book that wasn't like a team, it didn't read like a team book because it took a while for all the characters to come together, like that first year. And it was bizarre, but I really like that. I think I like that run more.
I don't know. It's kind of disappointing to me, but I was looking forward to it because I had, from getting them introduced from X-Men, I really liked them, and I was like, oh, this is a really cool team. And I was like, so to see Byrne be able to do that team and have his own book, I was super excited for it. And I
don't know if I ever read anything from that book.
You can't really see it. No, you can't see it. You can't. It's just pages and pages of nothing. There's just word balloons and sound effects and it's 4, 5, almost 6 pages.
Wasn't that Byrne? That one you were talking about, the Marvel Fanfare, that he did a story where there's no word balloons?
Oh, maybe that's what it was.
Because then he did that one issue where it was all splash pages too. I think it was a Hulk one. The Hulk, I think splash page was all Hulk.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was Byrne.
I liked it more than his Fantastic Four run because I read that Fantastic Four run twice, and it's got really good parts. But there's also issues where you're like, okay, I don't need to read that one ever again. It's sort of like, okay. The Negative Zone stuff is great.
Yeah.
I really like that. The adding She-Hulk was a lot of fun. it came across very. It's funny, we're going to talk about She-Hulk too, but it came across as like sometimes he likes to explain.
Oh yeah.
He's like, oh my God, and most of it is to explain. It almost feels like comic readers, this is why you're wrong about this situation. You know what I mean? Sometimes it comes across. He does that in Superman too a lot, where it's like, everybody thinks that my powers are blah blah blah, but in actuality, my powers are like this, and you're like, okay, Byrne, we get it, we understand, And I know some of that was because of, he's developing a new Superman and whatever. But when you go back and reread it, and Reed is like, you dummies, this really happened because of this, and you never would have figured it out because I'm smart. I'm like, thanks, thanks, you dickhead.
Made me love that Byrne run at FF, didn't he?
Oh, I love it.
It's a great run.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's everybody should read it. It's the same thing as like Simonson Thor and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You should read it because it.
Yeah.
I read I don't remember how many omnibus volumes it is, but I know I read volume 1 of that run.
The early stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just what he did with it, like just, coming back from the negative zone and they're all in reverse color of their costumes. Like that was smart. Like that was fun. It was smart. He got to change the costumes for a while.
Yeah.
I like the way he did that thing with Doom, how they went into Latveria and they ended up defeating Doom, but then they found out, actually throughout the process of infiltrating Latveria, they found out that that if you defeated Doom, how it affected the whole country, of Latveria, the poverty and all the stuff. And it was like, so I thought that was so well thought out because it's not something that we were accustomed to reading. Usually you go in there and you beat up the bad guy and da-da-da-da. And this was a complete different perspective of that scenario. And it made you kind of feel like, wow, what's the right thing to do here? Because if you take out Doom, then the country's going to collapse, and all these people are in poverty and famine. And, I was like, wow, that was really.
Were the people of Latveria always loyal to Doom?
Or just in that story, I think.
Okay.
It's sort of that, like what to Kevin's point, like it wasn't just that he didn't overthrow the country, or maybe he did, I don't know, whatever. But in that scenario, they were like, no, he's our ruler. Like,
yeah. Right. And he protects them. And,
yeah.
So they as citizens viewed it as, they've, I guess, I don't know if it's generational type thing that they've learned to accept it and realize that there's positives out of it,
There was somebody just put something on Twitter, I think, where they had a really interesting notion, and I don't know where they got it from, but they were talking about Reed and Victor Von Doom in college. And, the way the story is they were supposed to be roommates, and Reed was like looking at one of his experiments and was like, oh, some of these figures are wrong. And Victor's like, bah, what do you know, peon? And then he does the experiment, and that's where he gets a scratch on his face and blah, 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 blah. But they were trying to like put it into a little bit more modern terms of, okay, here's Reed Richards, who is a prodigy, probably went to college on scholarships, is from the United States, that comes from a family that has a legacy of being big brains or whatever. But here's this basically immigrant who did not grow up in any wealth or anything like that. His dad, his family was poor, and they were outcasts because of their heritage and all that other stuff. And then he's coming to the States and being told by this very, nerdy guy that he's wrong. It just was an interesting twist on that origin tale. And I thought that was kind of, I should really try to find it again. It was good.
Yeah. Agreed.
Nova, right? He created Nova. He did cool things with the Inhumans.
That's when they moved to the moon, right? That's when they moved
to the blue area of the moon. Galactus Falls, right? Remember that? big
Oh,
thing.
when the Avengers and all that, everybody was teamed up in that cover there where everybody was attacking Galactus as he's standing there on the cover.
Yeah.
And he did the Sideways issue. When it was like 52.
That was the Negative Zone stuff. Annihilus, his second child was stillborn with, and I like that issue where Reed's like, who do we know that knows anything about like radiation? And they're like, okay,
Yeah.
Dr. Octopus, and they go after for Dr. Octopus, and by the time they fight him and the big tentacles are going all over the place, by the time they get back, their baby's dead. And that was like, whoa, that was heavy. It was heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that storyline like wasn't messing around. Like, it was like hard hitting emotional stuff in that,
Yeah.
Not what you like expected from a comic book in the 80s or, like.
I guess, yeah, no. I mean, because, obviously, you had a lot of, mid 80s, that's when you got a lot of, you got Watchmen, you got Dark Knight, you had Miller's Daredevil, you had, a lot of stuff was getting dark, Well,
I guess what I meant to say was like, casual comic fans wouldn't expect such heavy hitting emotional stuff, right? You think like, you're just going to get a fun superhero book, here, kid, read this comic. And it's like, oh my God, this is fantastic. Baby died. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was March 1984 when it came out. I was 11 years old. Reading about a baby being stillborn. Like, whoa. And I still remember the I haven't read it in years, but the last page is them telling Reed, but it's got a huge black border around it. Like the panel is in the middle, and it's just like this huge black border, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah. Well, it's a family book, right? Like, those are family issues in many ways. So.
What year and month did you say that came out? May?
That particular issue, March of 1984.
March. I'm trying to think. I'm pretty sure I was just starting to read G.I. Joe comics, which was my first foray into a comic store. And then from there, jumped into other things. So I missed a bunch of stuff in those early 80s.
What was your first G.I. Joe comic?
21. I thought so. 20 had a picture of a Joe falling like from a plane, and it was an aerial view looking down on the Joe and the background of the ground way behind him. And I thought that was the issue that I was going to get because I was sick. The next week we had wandered into a comic store when picking up hoagies from the sandwich shop across the street. And I saw the posters in the window, and I asked my dad if I could run across and see what it was, and walked in like, my God, wow, look at this. I'm looking around and didn't get anything because I didn't have money and didn't have time. I mean, like you, I was like 11, 12, whatever. And Dad came over to get me after he got the hoagies, and we left. And then the next week I was sick, fever over the weekend, had frequently when I was a kid. And Dad said that he was going to the same sandwich shop to get, I guess, hoagies for Mom or something, and said, "Do you want me to get you anything?" I said, "Yeah, if you go across the street, get a G.I. Joe comic." So he did, and he brought home, and it was G.I. Joe 21. So in that week, it had flipped. And I opened this up. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with this? There's no words. What is this? And lo and behold, it was this brilliant issue then later, as I realized. But that started me going to the comic shop every month because the 7-Eleven across the street from my aunt's house, where I was getting some Spider-Mans and some Batmans and whatnot, they didn't have anything like G.I. Joe. It was just mainstay DC and Marvel, not even G.I. Joe, which was Marvel at that time. But going to the comic shop, I could get G.I. Joe. So then I started doing that a little bit, and then opened up to a bunch of other stuff when I discovered 1986's Justice League, the Giffen DeMatteis McGuire run. And then I went apeshit crazy for all kinds of different comics then.
That G.I. Joe issue came out in December of 1983. So it's almost 40 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Stop bringing us down, man. Sobering. We already talked about the gray beard, Pants' birthday. Come on, knock it off, man.
I hate this podcast. What the hell? It just makes me feel old every 2 weeks.
We're talking about medical problems, aging. Might as well gum my food.
Kevin, I actually wanted to ask you, because I think you and I are the only ones who went to Hildebrand's. Pants, did you ever go to Hildebrand's?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
On
Ninth Street there.
Yeah, 9th and Washington, was it? Right?
Yeah, 9th and Washington.
I was never there.
So is it Hildebrand or Brandt? Was it with a D or T? I can't remember.
I thought it was D.
Okay, sure. I just couldn't remember. Ken Hildebrand. And,
yeah, Ken. Yep.
Yeah. How early did it, and whatever happened to him? Do you know?
No, I don't. I had my subscription with him. When I found him, well, that was 84. Because I was working full time by then, and we happened to go past there, and I didn't even know he existed. And then I saw it, and I was like, "Oh shit, I got to go there."
Yeah, it was in the middle of the block on an alley. It was almost like Golden Eagle on 5th Street, where it was like on the corner, but it was in the middle of the block on a corner.
Right. Yeah, because it was one of the the alleys went down through the block. Yeah, and wasn't nothing spectacular for sure, but he only had about. I don't know, like maybe 10, 12 boxes of back issue stuff, which again, I was like, what? Back issues? Holy shit. I was like, I didn't know anything like that. And he was not very organized. He used to have stacks of comics, just stacked, not even in bags or boards and just hanging back there and stuff. But that's where I started, getting, I had been to Mile High by that time because I had gone out to visit my cousin in Colorado in 78 in December of 78, and he took me to Mile High.
Wow.
And
cool.
That time when we went to because there was multiple Mile High stores, and just so happened a week we were out there visiting, Jim Shooter was at the store. And
oh wow.
I got to meet him and had him sign some stuff. I actually drew a bunch of drawings and gave them to him, and then the local paper ended up taking a picture, and it was me, my cousin, and Jim Shooter.
Get out.
The front page. Yeah.
That's cool.
It was cool. But that was my first and only experience to a comic shop. And so Hildebrandt's was the first time, of a local comic shop. And then I, got a subscription with him, and the things that stuck out to me at that time, like Miracle Man, I was getting the Miracle Mans from Eclipse. Elementals, Bill Willingham's Elementals. What else? Some of the British magazines. It was an Action Force, which was kind of like a
yeah. I got the Action Force.
And Alan Moore's Captain Britain and those magazines. So I was getting stuff like that, which I really loved. But then what happened was Lem opened his store, and he had a different distributor. And then sometimes, I'd go in to pick up my books from Ken, and his distributor, I don't know if they had a shortage or something like that. So I was missing 2 issues, and then I would go down to Lem, and Lem had them, So, and then obviously Lem was, not even comparable in shop wise or whatever. And then I just started going into Lem's more and more. And then I switched and ended up going to and get my subscription to Lem, and then that was it. And I never went back to Ken's. And then the one day I was there, I think it was on a Saturday, and I was sitting there talking to Lem, and Ken walked in. I felt like shit. Oh yeah, I was busted. I felt like shit, but that's how we got it.
It was only 2 rooms. It was a front room and the room where you first walked in.
Well, it literally was just one room because he just had that little glass counter. And then behind it, and then I guess maybe there was a doorway behind it, but
just
behind him, behind the counters where he had the stacks of books that were just stacked on the floor.
Yeah.
And then there was 2 tables, one in the front at the window and one on the side where he had back issues.
I remember he had some sort of racks. One was shorter because when I went there for the first time, I got a whole bunch. He was having a sale on Omega Men. And I was like, okay, sure. Let me buy some. I don't even know what it is. But it's where I picked up I think I picked up some issues of New Teen Titans, the Baxter run, issues 1 or 2 or something, because I was missing those. And so we're talking 84-ish, I think I went there. Yeah. But it was, what was so interesting about it was it didn't feel like you walked in and went, oh, it's DC, Marvel, and some other thing. It just was comics. Everything was sort of mixed together. Whereas Lem on 5th Street had that giant rack. It was I was a kid, but everything was alphabetized, and so you saw everything, and it felt like, okay, you could easily pick out Marvel, DC. Ken's, you had to
Oh man, yeah.
Where am I looking? Why am I buying a random, Mr. X comic, because it just looks cool, and
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know how long he lasted there then after that.
I tried to look up some things online. Just I was curious, because it's what a weird, just a small little place in the middle of Reading, just my sister took me because I don't even know how she found it. She took me. She was like, "Hey, there's a comic store." I was like, "Oh, okay."
That's the only reason I knew about it is because I ended up driving past it one day and I was like, "Holy shit." I knew nothing about it. So,
yeah.
So my takeaway from this is that there's possibly a picture of Kevin with Jim Shooter in a newspaper in Colorado in some library in the back issue, or on microfiche.
Microfiche, yeah.
Somebody, if there is a listener anywhere out there, you please make a Saturday trip to the librry and try to find it. What year was that, Kevin?
Colorado Springs. It was 78. December. We flew out the day after Christmas in 78 and went out there and was out there for at least about a week. So it would have been the last week of December.
Oh my God. I want to see that picture.
Yeah,
you're going to so bad.
The sad thing is I had that. I mean, if we would have had this discussion a year ago, I could have showed it to you, but because I kept it, I kept one and I had it, up in my boxes of stuff. But when I moved last year, I mean, whatever wasn't worth selling got tossed, or I gave it away or tossed it.
You didn't even take a photo with your phone real quick before you picked.
Wow.
And the funny thing was, because I mean, it was like, it was so different because that's the first time that I really kind of traveled anywhere. You know what I mean? We used to go down to Stone Harbor for shores for vacation in the summer. And that was like my only extent of exposure outside of, Robizonia, PA, so flying to, I mean, it's the first time I was ever on a plane, and then, went to Colorado and he lived in Colorado Springs and you could see Pikes Peak from his backyard. And,
oh, wow.
And my cousin, I used to talk to him and, I was into Spider-Man and I was getting subscriptions at that time, getting Spider-Man, Hulk, and Moon Knight. Those are the comic subscriptions I would get in the mail. So I was doing all that, and then he used to talk to me about X-Men and stuff. And I'm like, what's this X-Men shit? I was like, what are that? And so then I went out to visit him, and he took me to the comic store, and I remember buying the first X-Men I bought was 140, which is where Wolverine's in the brown costume with Kurt and they're fighting Wendigo. And that storyline was taking place when I was visiting him because he showed me all the X-Men that he had, those Byrne X-Men. And I started, I just started immersing myself in it. So I went and bought that issue off the shelf and bought some back issues. And he opened my world to like comics that I had never seen before. And then, like I said, lo and behold, he told me, we knew that Shooter was going to be there. So, I remember drawing, there was a splash page in the one X-Men comic where they were fighting Sauron and Wolverine's leaping across the double page spread and he's slicing at Sauron. So I drew that picture and I drew like maybe 4 or 5 pictures and gave them to Shooter. And he signed, I had a Hulk magazine that had Moon Knight in it. He signed that for me. Anything, that I could find that I had, that had him as editor in chief, and so he signed a couple things for me, and so my cousins took us out before that happened, and so like my brother and I, they bought us cowboy boots and they bought us freaking cowboy hats. So I thought that was cool as shit. So I'm in that picture, I'm standing there with my Robbie Rowdy's baseballs jersey. And a blue denim cowboy hat.
Oh my God! Wow. Now we really need to see that picture. Pants. Go out to Colorado Springs. You have a mission.
Yeah, well, I just Googled some things and didn't come up with anything for Jim Shooter has been at Mile High many times with Chuck Rosansky. Didn't find anything from the 70s, however.
It's got to be out there. But, like I say, I didn't think that far to take a picture of it, and who knows? At this point, whatever I kept is in the storage unit, and I've been selling stuff ever since I've been here. So, I mean, there could be a slight chance that maybe it's still there, and it could very well be there. I don't know, but I certainly can't guarantee that. But I did. I kept it. I kept a copy of that paper ever, since 1978. So,
oh wow!
If I go in the storage unit and find it, going through my stuff, I will definitely scan it in and post it. So,
Charlito used to work at Mile High Comics.
Really?
Yeah, he has stories. I always love listening. Yeah, he does. He has stories that he don't tell. Oh, that's fun.
Huh.
What you talk about back issues at old comic stores. One of the neatest things, one Christmas, my aunt gave me a $25 gift certificate to this comic store in Pottstown. It was called Turk's, Turk, apostrophe S. And he had a Christmas sale between Christmas and New Year's, and back issues were 25 cents. And I went in with my $25 gift certificate and came out with 100 comics.
Yeah.
All kinds of Justice Leagues, old Batmans. I was having a field day picking out books. It was incredible.
25 cents.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was wonderful.
I used to go up to, when I was with Lem and had my, subscription with Lem and was doing, shopping with him. And then on occasions when I had money to blow, on certain weeks with working full time, I would go up to Cap's Comic Cavalcade.
Oh yeah, Cap's Comic Cavalcade, sure.
And he had different back issues, and that's how I ended up getting a lot of meat of my full runs that I ended up completing. I remember going up to him, and like you said, Shane, I would go up to Cap's and go in there with like $80, and I would buy runs of Amazing Spider-Man, and they were anywhere from $2 to $4 a piece. And I'm talking like 50s up through 100 some, buying those issues for $2, $3, $4 a piece, coming home with, stack of books, getting to sit down and plop down and read a bunch of Amazing Spider-Mans and stuff. So that's how I got a bunch of that stuff. I would just,
I always felt guilty going to another comic store. Like when I was hardcore into Golden Eagle, I always felt guilty, like,
well, I would check Lem's first, and then if Lem didn't have them, then I would make a trip up there if I wanted to do stuff. I used to even get some stuff down at what's his name, that
Pagoda
Zimmerman.
Zimmerman in Boyertown, Gilbertsville.
Yeah, they used to be down at Redinger's in Adamstown.
Okay.
Anson used to run that stand, so I would run down there. That's how I used to sit there and talk to Anson all the time. But
wow.
I ended up I remember buying like, that's how I completed my run of Byrne X-Men. Was
get out.
Redinger's.
Yeah, Zimmerman's, he had a store at Zern's Farmers Market, and then he also had a pet store in downtown Boyertown, and above it was another comic store. So I was frequenting there in the mid to late 80s. Because when the Batman movie came out, he had a bunch of Batman movie stuff in the store above the pet shop.
Nice. Yeah, I saw pictures of it. I was never one. I never went to that one, but yeah, he used to have a stand down at Redinger's. I used to go there, and everybody knows Anthem. So that was always a experience.
What was the name of the guy that ran Pagoda Comics?
Neil. Oh, Pagoda. Oh no, sorry. I thought you meant Neil at Golden Eagle. I'm sorry.
No, what was his name? Mike? Wasn't it Mike? He had glasses.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Because he was there in Lancaster Avenue, and then he went out to Antietam Shopping Center.
The Antietam ones, after Carlene and I met and we moved into like Birdsboro, I was going to Pagoda for a while at the Antietam store. And then I found Golden Eagle in Wyomissing and met all you guys, and that's where I stayed.
Is that the one on Penn Avenue, like out way past
Toll House shops?
He was in the Toll House shops.
That's where I that's where I know him from.
That's where I knew him from too. But obviously, like, we knew him because every once in a while we would come in and talk to Lem, but they didn't really get along, right? Because Lem didn't. As I recall, Lem didn't like him very much, right? He didn't like his business practices or whatever, because Lem was pretty good about stuff, like not super upmarking issues and stuff or whatever. And he would be like, oh, it came out 3 days ago, and we know now it's the first appearance. It's $4. It's like, wait, it's cover price. The new issue hasn't even come out yet. How are you? But he would do that shit, and Lim didn't like it. But I remember like I went in there like one time because there was some issue like I just didn't get, and we didn't have any more at either of the stores, and so I was like, I really don't want to. So I had to go over, and man, I felt like a jerk because I think I was actually working at Golden Eagle at the time, but it was like I really want this issue, like I need it. And I had to, and of course they knew me, so I was like, my baseball hat, like trying to act all nonchalant, like don't recognize me, but how do you not recognize? Like come on, we were competition.
Well, Pagoda, I actually went. It was probably on one of those times when I was not welcomed at Golden Eagle because I left too many comics in my back issue. Because I used to go away to school, so like I wasn't back all the time when I was in Philadelphia. But I sold them. Most of it was junk, but the one thing I did give them was the entire Alan Moore Swamp Thing run at the time. So I'd have to go back to see when this was. I think it was right before I was ready to go to college because I wanted some money. So it had to be like the early 90s. But whatever I wound up giving them, they gave me $300 credit. So it must have been some good stuff. I mean, to get $300 credit. So I was buying books, not for free, but basically I'd go in, buy a whole bunch of shit. And it probably lasted me maybe a year, if that. It doesn't take long to eat up $300. But yeah, I think I gave them maybe 2 boxes worth of books. Like I said, one of them was I'm sure there was like a lot of like late 80s Marvel. I might have given them like my Dark Knight Returns, like because I was just kind of getting rid of stuff, So and then I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to be here until that money is spent.
Well, funny you mentioned Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, Peter, because I wanted to ask something. I have a few books that are just like right beside my bed here, and I pulled out one to read the other day, and it's the Essential Vertigo reprint of Swamp Thing, starting with the anatomy lesson. So I reread that and really dug it. And then I realized, except for the few Crisis crossovers, I didn't really read much Alan Moore Swamp Thing. According to my database, I actually have the first trade of like 21 or 27 somewhere in the house. And I know that later on they introduced John Constantine, but I've never read it. Does any of that subsequent stuff you wrote stand up to as well as the anatomy lessons? That was a great read, and it changed the status quo of Swamp Thing, as I recall at the time. But I don't think I've read much after that.
Absolutely. That run is so, again, talk about reading a run, because I was reading it at the time. My first issue was Alan Moore's first issue, which is the previous issue, issue 20.
Issue 20, right.
And I don't know why I picked it up. I'm looking at the cover. It's just Swamp Thing getting shot at, and that's October of 1983. So I'm 10 years old reading Alan Moore Swamp Thing, and read it all the way up through, issue 60 something, I think is his last one.
Something like that.
Yeah. It is really good. It's wordy, but it is really good. And I think the thing about it is, maybe reading it now, you've probably read so much that has been inspired by it or just feels the same. But at the time, even my little, 10, 11, 12-year-old brain, I was like, this doesn't read like anything else that I'm reading. It's almost like literature. It's almost like poetry. It's almost like everything that people loved about Vertigo is spawned from that run. It's the reason why Neil Gaiman wrote Sandman, because characters that showed up in Swamp Thing, like the House of Mystery, House of Secrets, like, that's why Neil Gaiman wanted to write Sandman, right? And that's why John Constantine, that's why they wanted to write Hellblazer, because of this. Grant Morrison was inspired by it. And there's just Dark Crisis to this day is inspired by the big light darkness war that happens up to issue 50 of Swamp Thing. I mean, that's just pulling shit from 40 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really good. And the thing I really like about it too is that it's still kind of firmly planted within the DC universe at the time before it moved, years later to Vertigo. So you got appearances from Batman, you got appearances from Zatanna and some Zatara and Sargon the Sorcerer, and it's really good. There's a whole shortly after the anatomy lesson. There's it's called the Monkey King story, and it's like this little white monkey that comes to a kid. He's kind of like a demon, comes to him in his nightmares or something, and he has this blue tongue. And I read that issue. It was like reading a Stephen King book. I was totally freaked out. I was so scared of that book and so scared of that character. The demon shows up. Jack Kirby's demon shows up in that storyline too. It's so good. It's, talk about runs that you really should read. Like, I think if you really want a meaty, sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's dark, sometimes it has commentary, sometimes it's little one-offs as he's traveling the world and learning about himself, and it has ramifications with like the Parliament of the Trees, the Green, if you know what that is from Demi. Yeah. This is all that stuff that just came from. It's even got Adam Strange later on, Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a fantastic run.
Yeah, I don't know how I pretty much completely missed that. But if I can find the trade, at least that would get me started with the first 7 issues and see if I want to continue on from there. I'm sure it's been reprinted several times, but I just never tracked any of that stuff down. And I just came across that, the one issue was like, I know the annual listen is really important issue, but what happened after that? And thank you for giving me your thumbs up. That's what I wanted to know.
Absolutely. You'll love it because of those connections to the larger because it is. It's like it's a book about a green guy, like when I was a kid, I was like, why am I reading this? But it has connections, things that you probably already know about concerning certain characters, and then you'll read it and you go, oh, well, this is where it is, or just interesting takes. It's kind of like, Kevin, you said Frank Miller's Daredevil, like, I remember the one of the last chapters of Born Again where Frank Miller is talking about the Avengers, and he's talking about, doesn't he say something about Captain America is like, here's a man who can control gods.
There's a voice that can control God.
Yeah, right. Like the way that sort of dialogue is, Alan Moore writes that about the Justice League. He writes that about Batman. Like it's so interesting. It's just such an interesting take.
I've never read all that. I mean, I'm sure I read parts of it, but I've never read his whole run. But because I think didn't they reprint it like the Saga of the Swamp Thing or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I had some of it, and then I don't know if I missed some, and then I was just like, well, and I think the trades became so hard to get a hold of, and so
they were for a while.
I went back and got them, and never read it. So
yeah, it's good. It's really worth a read. Yeah,
and I love Alan Moore, and just to sort of segue into something else you wanted to talk about, certain artists are intertwined with Alan Moore in my mind, and I think one of them was Kevin O'Neill with the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and with Kevin O'Neill passing away recently, it's just
Well, I first read their pairing in like one of those Green Lantern backup tales when it was Len Wein and Dave Gibbons was doing the book. It was again like around 1983, and that's when I first started reading it. And it was great. Green Lantern was back on Earth. That's where you got Predator for the first time, if you know that character. That's where you got that's when John Stewart became Green Lantern again, right around the Crisis. But in these backup tales, these tales of the Green Lantern Corps, Alan Moore was writing short stories like, the first appearance of Mogo and these other short tales. And one of them, or a few of them, were drawn by Kevin O'Neill. And they were great. They were great. And his artwork was that led me to martial law and
oh gosh, martial law.
Yeah. I forgot
remember
about
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And And then eventually League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Yeah. This has been a crazy year for for creator passings. Man.
Yeah, it sure has.
Such immense talent that has in 1 year.
Yeah.
I mean, industry leaders, industry influencers.
Giants that will, Neil Adams, George Perez, Kevin O'Neill, Carlos Pacheco just passed, Tim Sale, not too, a while back. Like, these are people that who are the modern equivalents of some of these people, and I have a real hard time finding who they are.
Yeah.
Perez and Adams, I mean, I remember, getting exposed to them, and especially Neil Adams, because Neil Adams, when I first started seeing books that he was doing back in the early 70s, the Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and things, I was like, wow. I mean, I loved his art. I mean, it was so, that's to me like the first comic art that had like a realistic vibe to it,
Oh, sure.
The way he drew and the detail and it's like, wow, this guy's killing. I love this Batman. I mean, it brought me into stuff. His art drew me into, books that I had really not paid a lot of attention to. And it stood out to me, and I really enjoyed his stuff. I sought out his stuff.
Yeah.
Love Neil Adams.
Oh, Peter, you said, you're struggling to think of like who are the modern equivalents, and this is like a very philosophical question, right? But I don't know if there can be, right? Because comics were confined for a long time into like a sort of, most creators did sort of the same thing visually. I mean, you had your Jack Kirby and stuff that were different and were pushing the envelope a little bit, but even the envelope they were pushing was like just this much. And then in the 70s, like people started pushing it this much, right? And then you had the 90s where they, pushed it a little further. And now it's like you have all these people with all these different styles, and they do really incredible things, and they're very, very talented artists because the bar has been raised so far now. But even when they do something really dramatic collectively as a fan base, we're not like, holy shit. We're more like, wow, that's really cool. And so these people were the holy shit people that did big things at a time when people weren't doing that. And so that's why they really, really, really stuck out.
Yeah.
Or at least to us, right? Like, we experienced some of these people and really knew like this person was very different from a regular old book, like a house style, right? And we knew that. And now I guess younger readers maybe they can really tell apart these new people, even though, I don't know, like in a different way than we can tell people apart, because we were sort of looking for different things, I think, when we were experiencing all that change. And now the change is maybe more subtle.
Well, and I think you're right, because you look at books even in the mid 80s when like Dark Knight Returns came out. I mean, that I can remember on the shelf looking drastically different than anything else that was on the shelf, art wise. And I think you're right. To look at something that we grew up with was very different, because you had these people experimenting with different ways to do art in comics. And now so many independent creators can do that so much easier than what they would have 40 years ago, that it's a little bit harder to come across something that just blows your mind, because so many people have that opportunity now than what would have then.
Plus, they're allowed to, right? Because I think that's what you're trying to say. Yeah,
it's on the
publishers
table.
Are like, yes, we want to see something different, and people will buy it, right? Like, I don't know if people would have, if some of the creators now were drawing comics in the 80s, it might not have sold. That's why there were independent comics, because they could be a little more experimental in that format as opposed to. I remember picking up Ronin, right? Like, Miller is so interesting because he is always different. His Daredevil is different from his Ronin, is different from Dark Knight Returns. And it's like he just kept evolving himself. And it's so different from later things too, Yeah, I think you're right. It's I'm still wowed by really creative artwork now, but it probably doesn't hit the way that it used to back then, because I was just looking up who was drawing the X-Men before Neil Adams, and you had people like Werner Roth, who was kind of like a Kirby clone a little bit. You had Don Heck, who's one of those old classic artists that, you know, you sort of have to grow to. I mean, these are people way different than, and there's like an issue of or two of like Jim Steranko and Barry Windsor Smith, but that's before Barry Windsor Smith really became Barry Windsor Smith, you know. Right. And then you have Neil Adam in the Pharaoh issue, and everybody's going, "What the f? What is this?" You know?
Yeah. You had, you know, because you know the early '60s is, you know, when Marvel started, so you had, you know, this mass exposure from Ditko and Kirby, and you know, it just blew the doors open. And it was completely uniquely different. And in the early '70s, the same kind of thing happened. You know, you started getting this surge of other creators and other talent. I mean, and so you had a surge, you know, in each decade, more or less. You know, not exactly at the decade points, but
yeah,
you can just kind of see a surge, you know, and evolution of the industry in a whole. So
yeah.
I just think that graph, you know, it was going like very straight up for a while, like a sharp angle, and now it's like the envelope can only get pushed a little bit at a time because so much has already been done. I guess that's sort of the point, right? And again, but I think the base level of talent now is so much higher than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because that delta between where we're at now and where we were then is just so huge that now coming in to be a comic book artist today, you have to be immensely talented to be just like the base requirements for what people expect from beautiful art on a page, I think, right? People can still work with their own talent, but like, man, these people, but it's sort of weird because I don't know that they're getting appreciated as much as people. The old guard was appreciated because we recognized the difference in the quality of art, and now it's like, well, of course you got to be that good. You know, this is what comics look like these days. You know, it's like not fair to them.
I don't know if anybody's reading Batman Superman World's Finest with Mark Waid.
I read the first 2 issues. I have the rest, but I read the first 2.
So the artist on that, Dan Mora, who has been around for a while, he's doing some books with like Boom Studios, but now he's exploded all over, like doing variant covers for DC, doing this World's Finest. If he was a comic artist in the 80s, he would have beaten Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld and those guys, because his artwork is just so, like, it captures the DC universe in a way that I feel like hasn't been captured in a long time. Like, he's
I agree. I'll agree with that.
Good. Love his design work.
Yeah.
And that book is like reading DC in the 80s. I mean, it's
a lot of fun.
So good. So good. So there's an artist who still knows that he's playing within a comic book, right? He's not trying to be Bill Sienkiewicz. He's not trying to, trying to be too experimental. He's just doing good comic work. And his good comic work is still, so much better than even some of the people who've been around for a long time. Like he's so dynamic. I love it.
Yeah, guys like that are standing out to me, and like Jorge Jimenez.
Yeah. Oh yeah. On Batman.
Yeah.
I started seeing some of his Superman covers and stuff. I was like, wow, this guy's got it. And then he started doing a bunch of DC projects, and now he's at Batman, I guess, and or was doing Batman, or they relaunched it. I was like, wow. So those 2 guys, when you said more, that's the first thing I thought of, was him and Jimenez. Those are the 2 people that are standing out to me right now.
Well, and a lot of those people, I think what happened is, right, DC and Marvel Sal used to talk about this all the time, about how publishers would start going to Brazil and Spain, and and he always said, they're going there because they can get them for cheap, right?
Right.
But a lot of those people have now really become, people that are sought after for either like the guy who's doing Dark Crisis, like events or covers or just short runs. And when Carlos Pacheco passed, there were so many of those guys from Spain or wherever else who were like, they did nothing but thank him because he was, he's been around since the early 90s, and he was one of the first to sort of come from a whole different market of comics and paved the way probably for, I don't know, people like Salvador Larroca and, whoever else. I don't know. It just seemed like there was a wave in the 90s of these Spanish artists. And so that was really interesting to see as well, because you forget, and when these people are around for a while, you forget that they were the leaders of because we always know about like the Filipino invasion in the 70s, the British invasion of the 80s, Brian Boland, Dave Gibbons, all those people, probably Kevin O'Neill, to take it back to what Pan said. Yeah. And yet, but it's still happening, people in the 90s, people in the 2000s. It's like they pick a demographic or they pick a geographical point on the map, and they're like, what artists can we steal now,
Well, I mean, you're actually, because now you're dealing with a global pool, you figure these surges of evolution and throughout the comic industry and art wise. I mean, you think back in the 70s, everybody's, even in the 80s, you're still drawing on paper and you got to send the pages to the publisher and process. So, I mean, so like when you had the, like Rudy Nebreez and Tony DeZuniga and, those guys, Ernie Chan, people like that were influencing in the 70s, late 70s, you started to branch into that. But I mean, obviously with technology, you're able to pull from a much larger pool. So, I mean, that's why, it's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to stand out now, because you're just competing against a whole global environment. So,
Vance, have you read all the League stuff?
There's a couple of these ones that came out later, like after I think the Black Dossier, which I haven't tracked down all of them, but I have the with the omnibuses of like the first two volumes of the League, and the artwork is just stunning. And Al Moore worked so well with certain artists on books, and that was one that just stuck in my mind. That's just the time period that did sort of taking place in the 1890s and that kind of thing. It just suited Kevin O'Neill's artwork so well.
I fell off of those books because they started to get a little weirder and weirder,
Because it got more towards a modern era, you mean?
Yeah. But they were fantastic. I should really go back and read those at some point.
I never read the first volume. I'm not sure if I read the second one. I didn't read anything after that, except maybe a couple of the one-shot hardback things that were coming out. I might have read a couple of was it Nemo? The first two of those or something.
Those first two miniseries that were just so good. Oh my God.
So here's Kevin O'Neill. If this website is right. So Green Lantern 182, August of 1984. He does a backup tale. That one was written by Joey Cavalieri. And then he was on things like Omega Men. He did the Metal Zoic graphic novel for DC. I used to always see that ad, but I never read it. And then did Martial Law. And from there, little one-off things here and there. Lobo, some Clive Barker stuff, and then League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Doesn't have a huge, list of books, but his artwork is unique. And he passed young. I mean, he was 69.
Yeah, hell, Carlos Pacheco was only like 61 or something?
Yeah.
That caught me off guard. I mean, he just announced his diagnosis because he finally, I've been following him because he's always been one of my favorite artists, and I've been following him for a long time. And he's been having health issues, and it took like a year for them to finally diagnose what was going on with him. And when he finally announced it, and that was only like 2-3 months ago.
Something like that.
ALS, and I'm just like, and it made me look it up and go like, what's the life expectancy, and they were saying like 5 years, depending, that's average and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's all a blow to take. But I mean, I certainly was not expecting to hear him pass in 3 months.
No.
Did anybody read? I didn't even realize that they had put out a sequel to Aerosmith. Did any of you guys read that?
Didn't read it, but yeah.
No, I didn't read it.
Because that first Aerosmith is so good.
Yeah.
And then it says, Wikipedia says it was this year that the sequel came out. So I'm going to have to get a copy of that.
Yeah.
I loved his Fantastic Four work was so good.
Yeah.
That's the run that I have one of the pages from.
Well, and it's so interesting. We talked about John Byrne's Fantastic Four because they both started with a Diablo story.
Yeah. That's one of the pages that I have is a Diablo page.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like got the whole Fantastic Four like tied up, like chained to the wall, and so they're all 4 characters are on the page with Diablo and everything. So it's like pretty. I mean, to be fair, the FF's sort of small and kind of like in the background, but they're there. Yeah. They're all there on that page, and it's Carlos Pacheco, and that was all I could afford. When I got that, that might have been one of the ones I bought at Wizard World Chicago when would that timing have been right, or did that run come out later than that?
Was it Chicago or Philly?
No, the one when I bought a couple pages when we were out at the Crusaders thing in Chicago, and I just don't remember if maybe this was after that.
September 2000 was his first Fantastic Four issue.
Then that wouldn't have been that convention.
After that, yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah.
It was like a $90 page, which was, felt like a lot of money at the time.
Well, let's look at Pacheco. So he did, I don't know. Again, this may not be complete, I'm sure, but there was something called Dark Guard, a bunch of issues of Flash, including some of those early appearances with Impulse. The Bishop miniseries, I do remember.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Getting that. That was with John Ostrander. Of people. During the Age of Apocalypse, he did some of those X-Universe books, Starjammers, a run on X-Men, and then that led to Avengers Forever in 1999, then the Fantastic Four stuff, JLA, JSA, Virtue and Vice, which was just
gorgeous, gorgeous.
Aerosmith.
That was a hardcover graphic novel. That was original story.
Is it a Thanksgiving story?
Yep.
Yeah.
Aerosmith's.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, a run on Superman, Batman. He started the Green Lantern with Jeff Johns for a little bit. Kurt Busiek.
Right.
2005. Yeah.
Yeah, a Superman story with Kurt Busiek, and then on and on and on and on and on. That JLA, JSA, Virtue and Vice was like, holy shit, is that good?
When that came out,
and Avengers Forever too. That was
I didn't read it when it came out. I read that years later, years and years later.
I don't own much artwork by Pacheco. I think the only piece I have is the one I texted you guys. I have the cover for the Tangent. Superman's, I forget the actual name of the book, but it's with the 2 Flashes, the Barry Allen, the Wally West Flash and the Tangent Flash on the cover. I think it's called Tangent Superman's Reign, something like that. And it's a great cover. That's actually the only Pacheco art I think I do own. But it's beautiful.
It's a nice cover, Pants.
It is.
I'm finding the FF page because it's on the app. So I'll just gonna find it here and screenshot it for you guys.
Yeah.
That came out in 2008, Pants. The Tangent Superman Reign.
Yes. Okay.
2008. That seems like forever ago.
I just liked him because, and it was like him, Salvador LaRocca, because they were all on Flash, right? Like a bunch of them during the lead up to issue 100 with Mark Waid and Cobra. It was like there was like these artists that would flip flop back and forth, and they sort of looked alike, but they weren't, and and just something about Pacheco, like he went on X-Men, and I don't know, it just was so good. And that Avengers Forever, that was like Perez doing Crisis. I mean, it was just insane, the detail, and then I guess we should talk about Kevin Conroy.
Oh,
I mean, it's one of those things that I can't, without a live action Batman, there's not, whether it's reading a book or an animated version or whatever. I mean, it's like, it's not even conscious. It's like, I hear that voice.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. His voice for years is what I hear when I read Batman in anything.
I mean, it's kind. I mean, it's such an. I don't know. I think it's an anomaly. In essence, that for him to, what's the odds that he auditioned and got that part, and then that being like that was his career.
Yeah,
that one character, but it was so profound. That's how he was able to maintain being that character for decades, and like what, like you just waiting to hear some kind of stupid audition story, like he almost might not have gone there, or he was auditioning and wasn't getting roles, and that was the one he was going to give up, and then they ended up doing, or something stupid like that. And
he was auditioning for that I Can't Believe It's Not Butter commercial, and he walked into the wrong room, and they were like, "Hey, you're Batman," Yeah.
I can remember when the pandemic started, I was rewatching Cheers. And as the seasons went on, the earlier seasons, I am pretty sure he showed up as one of Sam's old baseball buddies.
Oh, really?
In the bar, at the table, or something where they interacted for a couple minutes. He wasn't in it for more than a few minutes, but I was like, wait a minute. I think that's Kevin Conroy.
I'll be damned. And well, obviously, I'm sure when we saw it when it was out, we didn't know who he was. So
yeah. Oh, yeah. Look that up. See if I'm right about that thought.
You should on YouTube, on the Warner Brothers Entertainment channel, they have it's called the Heart of Batman documentary. If you've never seen like what they went through to get that series onto TV, and how Warner Brothers was so hungry to have an animation department that they almost let them do, almost anything. And I think what was around at that, well, a lot of it also had to do with Steven Spielberg, because he was coming in and wanting to do Tiny Toons, I think it was first. And, they were like, well, Steven Spielberg wants to do animation, of course. He's either Tiny Toons or Animaniacs. I forget which one came first.
I'm pretty sure it's Tiny Toons came first.
And then because of that, most of those people would then go on to do like some of the Batman animated stuff, because they were like, they just had the right people. When you watch this documentary, it's like the right people at the right time. They got Paul Dini, Bruce Timm, and someone else who had never really headlined a show like this before. And they were like, well, if we're going to do it, this is what we're going to do, and it's a great documentary. You just have to, if you've never seen it, you have to watch it.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
I've never watched it. I have to look that up.
But I have not watched it, so it's like an hour and 38 minutes long.
Yeah, so good. Because we just assumed, I just assumed that hit because, you're coming off the heels of the Tim Burton movies and everybody was Batman crazy. So of course it's going to be a success. It's been a while since there was like a quote unquote, not an adult cartoon, but a cartoon that adults could like. And I just assumed that's, I thought it was a no-brainer that it was going to be successful. Then you watch this documentary and it's like, oh, wow, they really were very lucky in a lot of their choices.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just heard recently the Tim Curry as the Joker part. I don't like it.
He was supposed to.
I love Tim Curry, but I'm so glad Mark Hamill did it. And anytime, I love stories like you'd hear Kevin Conroy talk about doing an animated movie, and he wasn't the voice every single time as the years went on. But if Mark Hamill was tied to it, he'd be like, okay, let's do it. Or if he was doing it, he's like, I only do it if Mark Hamill does the Joker. Like whatever they would work out, man. Those stories are kind of neat.
And I loved, of course, when the series went on with the Justice League, he was still the voice.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started getting video games like the Arkham Asylum, he did the voices for that too. And I was like, well, now this is just what you need here. I mean, he's like the Batman. So I still have a couple of the games. I play them every now and then. And it's like, it's good to know he's always there. It's great.
Yeah. He was the glue, right? Because they did the Batman, then they did the Superman. And the Superman animated series. Then they wound up doing Justice League, and then Justice League, it kept getting bigger and bigger.
Unlimited.
Yeah, Unlimited. Then they start going into the DC animated movies, and he's starting to voice occasionally.
Yep.
Yeah. But think of who is it that does the voice for Batman in Brave and the Bold? What's his name?
Oh, Dietrich Bader.
He's basically doing Kevin Conroy, right? Like everybody who does Batman after him is just basically doing Kevin Conroy or just
facsimile thereof.
Yeah. So even when he's not doing the voices, he's inspired everybody else's choices. It's very rare that they go off.
He did Justice League Action too, right? The more recent one. He was Batman in that too.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting how that one show spawned, well, how many years has it been now? It's 40? No,
30 years. 1992 it came out.
Yeah.
Like if it wasn't for that decision, again, when you go back to it, Warner Brothers would not have that whole side of their whole DC animated thing just because of that cartoon and because of how good it was, obviously. So, I think I met Kevin Conroy, or like I'm sure we all did, like saw him at a convention, and like you want to try to go say hi to him, but he's always swamped.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I never actually walked up to meet him. I wish I could have, but I didn't.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I saw him at a convention somewhere along the way.
It's so unique to me, that his voice. I mean, and just the way to I don't know. I just think it's like lightning in a bottle kind of thing. I mean, it's just so
absolutely.
So rare.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say it's so rare. Just like the actor who played Superman, was it George Reeves that did both Superman and Clark Kent, but very different. In the radio dramas as well. Kevin Conroy was the same way. He sounded so good as Bruce Wayne, but it was so different than Batman.
Yeah. And then you think about he actually gets to play Batman in the Crisis on Infinite Earth CW thing, and he plays the Kingdom Come version, and
I love and I listen to it occasionally, every few weeks. World's Finest, with the Batman Superman animated series. There's a part where I think they're in Lois's apartment, and Superman's talking to Bruce Wayne, and he has his Bruce Wayne voice, and then Superman says something like, "I'm something about trying to find the Joker," and Kevin Conroy instinctively just turns on to the "I'm having trouble finding him." Like just this Batman voice comes right out in the next sentence when they start talking business. It just sounds so good.
My favorite Batman moment is in one of the Justice League Unlimited. I think it's Justice League Unlimited, and I think it's written by Warren Ellis, where he's falling, and he goes, "Okay, it'd be really great if somebody could catch me because I can't fly at all. Now would be nice." And he's just like totally chill, falling down, and then Superman comes and catches him. It's great. I love that moment. So fun. Oh, stop dying, people.
It's that fun. I mean, none of us are getting any younger, obviously.
No.
Speak for yourself. I'll let Pants age for me.
Did you know I'm reverse aging? I don't know.
Yeah.
that what that hairstyle is? Where, babies only have the hair up top.
Yeah. I'm just, exploring the hair that I wanted in my youth, but wasn't allowed to have.
All right. Oh wow.
I was going to say you're Mork from Ork. You age backwards.
Yeah. Benjamin Button.
The son Mirth, I think. Shane.
Mirth.
Jonathan Winters.
Jonathan Winters. Oh gosh.
Oh my God. Right.
Pam Dauber.
So, do we want to talk about anything? Did we read She-Hulk or?
Yeah, I read She-Hulk.
She-Hulk #1.
And the Marvel Comics Presents. I read that. Too.
Oh, did you read that? Yeah, it's cute, right? It's just
I forgot about the Marvel Comics Presents. Darn it!
It's short.
It's a nice lead-in. It's just kind of a. It's like it's a winter boredom. She's bored and she ends up calling up the Thing and. Wouldn't it be nice, because that was she leads it in like, something the most difficult thing to face. And then she's like boredom, and she ends up calling Ben and then they're talking and then she's, has all this stuff going on, like Doom shows up and then it's Magneto and then Galactus and then freaking crazy. But it was enjoyable. Yeah. And then I read the first issue and, it's been a while since I read that. I mean, I read it when it came out, but I don't think I've read it since. And I was like, well, I wonder what this is like again. And it wasn't as it was more subtle in the way he did it originally. It's like you only break the fourth wall like once or maybe twice. But she would reference things. Like in the. Was it the Marvel Comics Presents or something where she was saying like, the things that have gotten published before then, I got my own series for so long and, this, that, and then a graphic novel and, So that kind of stuff was kind of interesting. But I mean, I'm reading the first issue. It was kind of just like reading another comic and the Circus of Crime and the Ringmaster. And, odd, but yet.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if it and if it had to be that way because he probably had the idea that he wanted to do all these things, but you can't like throw it all right in that first issue. You gotta let it develop, maybe. Because I think mostly what he had the most fun with is sight gags. There was a lot of different sight gags, like what was the one?
For a character like that, because I mean the character was pretty much. It wasn't a forefront character up until that point, and what he was able to do with that character.
That's where you get the whole notion of her. She just likes to have fun, right? Like her being She-Hulk is a good time. He did it in Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
He did it in the graphic novel. Like it wasn't. He didn't want her to be like her cousin. Right. we already got that. So. I appreciated that aspect of it.
Yeah, I did too. And you kind of get that it is a different feel to it, which I like, and he did a lot of, as it became so popular and he continued to experiment throughout the series and, the parody of the Demi Moore cover, the pregnancy cover and, all that kind of stuff. He was just having a blast with it. And it was fun. It was a fun book. And I didn't think I would like it because I was kind of like, I was, the breaking the whole fourth wall thing and stuff. I was like, I don't want, but it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me at all.
There's the one thing I was talking about with the sight gag where she's chasing the circus people, the Circus of Crime, and she throws something. So the next panel they're running this way, and then the next panel then something else gets in their way. So it's almost like. Taking what he might know from like cartoon strips every now and then.
That scene reminded me of like watching an old cartoon, Yeah. But it's not corny, you know what I mean? It's fun, but it's not. It doesn't undermine, the direction of the book and the character. Just adds another element to it.
Yeah. And I heard
go ahead. No, go finish your thought.
Well, I was just going to say, like some people have been saying, like the She-Hulk TV series is very inspired by the Dan Slott run, but it's also inspired by this because I don't think the Dan Slott run was as fourth wall breaking as this one was. Like, I think it's really sort of a combination of the two series more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a few thoughts on this book. One, well, first of all, I just like, God, I love John Byrne's artwork back when he was like at his prime. It's just so good. So good. But this is, I like this book. This was one of these like classic covers, right? That like, and I was trying to think like, why is it a classic cover? Because it's not necessarily like an amazing cover, but it's a cover we've seen a lot, right? Whether it was on the back wall at Golden Eagle or whether it was like on the Mile High Comics ad where they would, show covers and then have like, for a while, this was like a popular book. So it would be like, hey, you can get issue 1. So we just saw the cover. There were certain covers that people of our age were exposed to a lot, right? And I was trying to think, like, I don't spend as much time in the comic book store as I used to, so I guess it's not really applicable anymore, but I feel like I don't see covers as much, like they're not as important, and there's not these like classic. Are there any new classic covers in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years? There probably are, but I don't know that I've seen them or but I feel like there used to be way more common that it was like something would come out and you'd look at it on the shelf and you'd just be like, oh, I remember, like that's like ingrained in my brain now. And then you would have random exposure over the years to different wall books or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
That was my first. I was like, I remember looking at this cover then going, oh yeah, that was all over the place for a while, But then there are a couple things in this book that's funny. So when she appears as Glamazonia, whatever, my first thought is, somebody changed her clothing while she was like hypnotized, and that's super creepy. And like they don't talk about it in the book. Like when she comes to, she's not like, you molesters, I'm gonna tear your face off. Like, so that was like a little like, oh, like by today's standards, like massively cringy. But then she picks up the crowd and is like gonna, and they're all like, oh my God, is it a robot? It's like, they can't see her. She's underneath.
Yeah.
There's 30 people in the audience, all these little word balloons. None of them can physically see her from where they're sitting. That's all. I was like, what are they talking about?
She's as big as the Hulk.
Yeah. It's like,
directly
what?
under you?
Yeah. Like you don't know what's happening. So I know that's like super nitpicky and weird, but it like really hit, I guess, if I had read this book when it came out, which I didn't, but maybe I would have noticed, but as a 48-year-old, I was like, what in the hell are they talking about? This really took me out of the book for like 5 seconds before I turned the page. So
there's like a mirror off to the side.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
There's some. Okay.
Well, when you read, Kevin, I don't know if you remember the She-Hulk graphic novel that he did before this.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. It's fantastic.
I mean, it's a story about S.H.I.E.L.D. is worried that She-Hulk is going. She's a member of the Fantastic Four at this time, and she's dating Wyatt Wingfoot.
Right.
And S.H.I.E.L.D. is worried that she might go Hulk, like Bruce Banner, and they're like, we got to bring her in, right?
Yeah, we want to expect check things out. Yeah.
Right. And Nick Fury's like, he's like, no, I'm not part of this. So they delegate it to someone else. And when they bring her up, one of the dudes is like, all right, now strip. And she strips in front of them. And then later he said they want to scan her or whatever. And the same dude like has a video of that thing. And I'm like going, Byrne, you're a little creepy. Like he's always trying to, like, some of it you want to say, okay, is he doing the cheesecake thing because she is a 7 foot tall, Glamazonia. And the cover is even of that graphic novel is kind of evokes the weightlifting craze of the 80s, right? She's in like a weightlifting pose or let me show my arm muscles pose. And yeah. And that was a big, I get it. That was a big thing in the 80s. But there's several times, like you said, Brian, to my brain now, I'm like, Yeah, see, that's why people think you're a pervert, because you always were. There was a thing in Fantastic Four where she was sunbathing and somebody took photos of her and were trying to sell it to a porno mag, and I'm like, that's a little sketchy. Why are you doing that with? He does it later in this series where she's jumping rope, and even though she's wearing clothing, the rope lines make it look like she's not, right, and it's a gag, right? Like she's going to jump rope, so she's bouncing and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, he like
fanboy thing. I mean, it's always, he was, it's male realism and fantasy, and playing up that he took advantage of that. Nobody ever touched upon it like that, and he embellished upon it.
And part of it, some of it, you could say was her character too, because she was like, hey, I don't got nothing to hide. I know what I look like,
Yeah.
And that was an element of, I finally watched the She-Hulk series, and there was like kind of an element of that too, in that, like her noticing the difference.
People liking that version of her better.
Right.
And,
thing, Oh, that was a huge part of that in at least one of the episodes.
Mm-hmm. Vance, what did you think of this issue?
I enjoyed it a lot. I haven't read much Marvel, let alone much Marvel Byrne, that I was stunned by the artwork. Is beautiful, and I didn't really realize that he also wrote a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see, the appeal of this. That again, the art is just gorgeous. I wasn't that familiar with the Carnival of Crime. Is that what it was?
Circus of Crime.
Circus of Crime. Yeah. I knew of the Ringmaster, so it's like, okay, some new villains. That's okay. But I love at the very end where she's like, I bet the readers are going to figure out who the villain is before I do by the end of the story. So I was like, okay, there's a nice little touch there.
Yeah, because she was like saying something.
This came out, what, like the 82, 83? Is that when this came out? Or
89.
89, yeah.
I'm sorry, I got my dates all wrong. So he was still working on it. Well, didn't Byrne also leave for DC at that time, or?
Yeah, but he would bounce. He might have been off Superman by this point, actually.
Oh, okay.
He might have been.
Like I said, I'm not familiar.
Wasn't Man of Steel like 86?
Yeah.
So, I think he was done with Superman at this time. That's why he came back and was doing this stuff with Marvel.
Yeah, he was because Superman Action was up to Action Comics Weekly at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So he was well off Superman at this point. And,
okay.
Yeah. Roger Stern, Dan Jurgens was, this was when Superman was in space during this point. So it was Roger Stearns, Cary Gamble.
Mm-hmm.
Which some of those stories were stories that Byrne would have done, but maybe not in that way. So.
It wasn't much longer after this that he started Next Men.
Yeah.
Dark Horse. Yeah.
I like that run.
That's a good book.
Yeah, it was a good book. I did like that myself.
I think I got that bound. I think that's a hardcover up on my shelf now.
I have the trades of it. I don't have access to them right now, but I do have the trades of it because they ended up collecting it, and then they did like a large, like almost like an epic collection where they put all the runs in one trade or whatever, something like that. I haven't read that in a long time. I had the poster of it. I remember because I used to get some of them from Lem. He'd get those posters in the envelope, and then some he'd hang up and some he wouldn't. And I just liked the artwork, So I used to ask him for some, and he'd give them to me.
So here's a question I had for this issue. When she's recounting the origin of first the Hulk, and then and then herself, he clearly draws the Gray Hulk, right? And in his Hulk run, I think the Gray Hulk was part of his run at some point. I think, because then later Peter David would really, play with the Gray Hulk. But
Well, the Hulk was gray in the beginning, right?
In the beginning, right? But then they immediately changed it to green, right? And then when you read origin stories after that, they kind of forget that he was gray. And I wondered, who was Byrne the one that brought that? Like, who was the one that finally said, no, it's no longer going to just be a Stan Lee story that the printing was wrong or whatever. We're going to make a continuity that he was gray, and then he was green, you know. And I wondered if it was Byrne when he had that short run in the 80s, but I didn't research it.
I'm sure you're right, because I mean, you know, obviously Peter David went bananas with that, you know, and did a lot of great stuff with that Gray Hulk with Mr. Fix-It and all that stuff. And I thought there's something now that you say that, I do feel that there's something that he did embellish upon that as well. I didn't think of that when I was reading that, but I believe you're right.
Well, here's a cover with the Gray Hulk fighting She-Hulk, Incredible Hulk 326 in 1986, but it's Alan Milgram. So Byrne had left. So I wonder if it's one of those leftover stories that he was going to eventually get to, maybe? I don't know. Maybe it wasn't Byrne. So some Hulk fanatic out there, you know.
Yeah.
I would love to know, when did they actually put the Gray Hulk into continuity as opposed to just being a printing error or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
When you were talking about, you know, like the little bit of cheesecake that goes into this comic, this was the line I was looking through because I remembered a thing that I wanted to talk about, and it was when she's getting her shower and getting changed, and she has to borrow clothes from the police, and she says, well, these duds are a bit on the snug side. One deep breath and my adventures are going to be printed in the Epic line, which is like a super inside joke, because and like Gru, I think at the time, the only Epic comic was Gru, maybe, or how much? Because there weren't many things under the Epic line, right? Or was there like an Elektra book or something? Or
Dreadstar came out through that too, and
Dreadstar, and there was it Star? Who was the one with
Star Brand or something? No, that was that other.
That was New
imprint.
Universe.
Yeah. William Coluto. They did
Star Seed,
Starstruck, or something.
Star Seed. Yeah.
Jackson Geist did the one. It was they were like pirates, but it was like
Swords of the Swashbucklers.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
So there was a few, but I mean, it wasn't like a big line, but there was a few of those at that time. You know, and then they had the magazine then too, right? Epic Illustrated.
Yeah, let's see.
Because that's where he did the last Galactus story in the magazine.
Yeah, there wasn't much by this point.
Right. I'm sure it was just like those 3 or 4.
There was that Havoc Wolverine meltdown.
Oh yeah,
man, yeah, I remember
that. Michael Moorcock's.
Oh, the elf thing, whatever.
Yeah. Elric of Melbourne. Was it?
Yeah. Elric. Yeah, that's right. It says that Cadillacs and Dinosaurs was in there. I'm looking at Wikipedia, and also Saxon Violins by Peter David.
Yeah,
that was before it moved over.
That was early 90s. Yeah.
That came
Stray
out.
Toasters was an Epic comic. I didn't know that. Wow.
Dreadstar.
And Wild Card.
Did we cover Dreadstar? Is that what you said earlier?
And I remembered, like, that one, and also that Elektra Lives Again. I remember that being an Epic book. Elf Quest. That was.
Yeah.
So there was more than I remembered. Yeah. But they were sort of few and far between, because this spanned a lot of years.
They weren't all printed at the same time. So
yeah, it was 14 years. And so, like, that's not a lot of books at any one given time.
The Epic was the kind of the Vertigo of the Marvel Universe.
Mm-hmm.
Gave them an able to tell different stories.
I think they kind of pushed it once we did get like New Universe, and I think they wanted to try to make it's like having a new line, but superheroes, but quote unquote in reality or whatever however they try to promote it, you know.
Yeah.
And we all know how that turned out. I like those books.
I did. I mean, Starbrand. I those first like 10 issues of Starbrand. I love that book.
Yeah.
Still do to this day.
I can still remember going to the comic store and seeing the one shot, The Pit, for New Universe, and thinking, well, I didn't know they were doing something on the G.I. Joe base. I wonder what that's about. I picked it up, took it home, and I read it. I'm like, this does not make any sense.
But that's when that's when that was going on. That was in like 87. Because I was going out when I met my ex, Jess's mom. She was living in Pittsburgh. So that's when I used to go out to visit in Pittsburgh, and then I'd go to Ides. And that's when every time I would go to Ides, I would have to buy, something, one of my major back issues or whatever. And at the time, I was in the Star brand, and because it was based, Jim Shooter's from Pittsburgh, so he based the story in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And with that whole pit thing going on, the guys at Ides told me, and they were like, yeah, we're doing a sign-up sheet, and you can write something and put your name in there. And this was going to be published in the back of the issue of the pit. That this was, that they worked it out with Marvel, that, because it was Pittsburgh and Ides was the store in Pittsburgh. And so people were, were writing it. And I wrote my name down and stuff like that. And it never ended up getting printed. But I was looking forward to it. That's why when I saw the pit, I was like, awesome. I can't wait to see this because my name's going to be in it. And ended up not doing it. But
who was the writer? John Byrne and Mark Grunwald.
Yep. Yeah, because he took over after Shooter on Star brand.
Yeah.
And it went downhill as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. He kind of killed it.
Yeah, he did. Odd.
What else did we read? Anybody read or see? I saw the Alfred Hitchcock. I saw the Lamb to Slaughter episode, Pants.
I didn't watch that. I wanted to. I didn't.
Yeah.
I was wondering how they were going to wrap that up. Did anybody else watch that?
I did not.
Yeah,
I didn't get a chance.
It was so. It's a housewife. Her police chief husband comes home. He's agitated, and he starts saying, "I'm going to leave you. I want a divorce." What year was this?
It was the episode aired. April 13th. It looks like 1958. Starring Barbara Bel Geddes, who was actually also in Hitchcock's Vertigo earlier that year, and probably is best known as playing Miss Ellie on Dallas.
Okay. I know who that is.
I just thought it was interesting that he said those words. I wondered how viewers at that time, late 50s, and he's like, I want a divorce. Because I was like, oh. And she's like, what? No. Let me just cook you something. And he's getting his stuff, and he's like looking through his stuff in his desk. She goes, all right, I'm going to go cook for you. And she goes to the garage into the meat cooler and pulls out this huge thing of lamb and I whacks him on the back of the head with it. And as soon as she went for it, I was like, oh, I know what she's going to do. Yeah. You could sort of tell. And then the rest of it is just how, because the cops come and they question. She makes it look like a crime scene. And it's like, how is she going? I won't say, how she gets away with it. But I thought the ending was very clever. How he weaved that story of, is she going to get away with it? How is she not going to get away with it? How does she explain it? And it wasn't as necessarily as nerve inducing as that other one you had us watch. Mm-hmm. But I was still sort of engaged because I was like, the cops are kind of figuring out what happened, but they can't pinpoint things. And you're like, what? How is this? What's going to, and then once you get to a certain point, you're like, oh, I got it. I see how this is going to end. And that's how it ended. So I was like, okay.
It is one of the better known Hitchcock Presents episodes. And this one was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. And it was, the teleplay was by Roald Dahl, who also wrote the story.
Wow.
And if I can just give you one, I hate to just push the button here, but just one more Hitchcock to watch. Another episode based on story written by this same guy, Roald Dahl. It's from 1960. It's called Man from the South, starring Steve McQueen.
Wow.
And Peter Lorre.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
This is probably one of the, if probably the best known Hitchcock episode. It's been, I think, imitated several times. Quentin Tarantino did a take on it. You talk about suspenseful. This is suspenseful. Now, it's not directed by Hitchcock. It's directed by Norman Lloyd, who, for goodness sake, could have we could do a whole thing on Norman Lloyd. This guy, he just passed away last May of 2021 at 106.
Wow.
He worked with Hitchcock. He worked at the Mercury Theater, I think, with Orson Welles. Probably best known as an actor for being on St. Elsewhere. Played Dr. Daniel Auslander. But he's been in everything. By the way, that episode, Man from the South, is just out there. So if I can maybe have you watch one more thing. I don't want to push the thing to, but that's a great episode. So
well, Dahl is isn't he an author? Like is
didn't he do Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or am I thinking of?
These are all great questions. Wasn't prepared for follow-ups.
I'll look that up.
Okay.
Well, he's a British novelist.
Yeah, right. Because that name is that's not a common name to put those two names together. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, you're right. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. My God, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Woohoo.
Wow.
But yeah, those Hitchcock episodes are just awesome there. And if I could just take another TV tangent for just a bit. So I mentioned that Barbara Bel Geddes was in the episode, and she played Miss Ellie on Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Until she was replaced by Donna Reed briefly. And then Barbara came back, and Donna Reed left, and she sued. Anyways, whole big thing. So keep Donna Reed in the back of your mind. So Shane, we watched the last time we watched episode of Moonlighting.
Yeah.
And great episode, but the reason why we sort of watched is because you mentioned how, it wasn't really available on streaming services. And then the next thing you know, the creator, we're going to put it on streaming services, right? So I'm going on the theory that someone heard you talk about it. And so we have the power here.
Yeah.
So
if only.
Yeah. So I'm going to use that little nugget and try something here. We'll see how this goes. So the Donna Reed show is one of the shows I started watching when I was on Nick at Night back in the 80s.
Sure.
And when it ran for 8 years, from the 50s, 58 to 66, 275 episodes. When Nick at Night showed it, they only had 175 episodes. I'm not exactly sure why. They had all of seasons 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Like 2 episodes from season 4, all of season 5, and then all of season 8. I was like, okay, that's weird. So I never saw much of season 4, 6, or 7.
Yeah.
Flash forward now to the last 10 years, it's now out on DVD and streaming. And they put 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. No 6, 7, 8. So season 4 now is out. And when they put it out, they advertise it as the lost episodes. Because, they haven't been seen in a while.
Sure.
And it's a 39 episode season. I'm actually about 10 episodes in. It's not the greatest thing, but it's new to me, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
There's even an upcoming episode where Shelley Fabre plays a daughter, sings the song Johnny Angel, which you probably may have heard of. And I'm thinking, how in the world, what's the plot where she sings Johnny Angel in the show? So I'm looking forward to watching that. So anyway, so now there's still 2 seasons, 6 and 7, I've never seen. You can't find them anywhere. There's I think maybe 3 or 4 at best on YouTube.
They're not even on DVD?
No, I think it's something with rights. It's above my head. And I'd love to see him because A, I've never seen him, but B, they also have a new character, the next door neighbor, David Kelsey, Dr. David Kelsey, played by a pre-Hogan's Heroes Bob Crane.
Oh, wow.
So
I didn't know that.
I've never seen those episodes.
Yeah.
I'd love to see him. So now my plea is, whoever's listening, put season 6 and 7 out on the home video. Thank you. Off my soapbox.
You want to see Bob Crane before he goes to Hogan's Heroes?
Yeah, I mean, because Shane, you did with Moonlighting, so let's see if it happens with me. It's a long shot. Like I said, I'm only in season 4 of my watching right now.
Yes,
so by the time I get to season 6, you've got a year or so till I get there. Work on it. Do it for pants. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah, the ethers. Put it out there.
But I thought about, well, Shane, you got some power. Shane, you said that didn't happen. Let's test this theory out.
I actually think the announcement happened before the show, and I said,
no, hey. don't ruin the illusion, Shane. Work with me here.
No jinxies.
Work with me here. Did you want to talk about JSA also, or
we can talk about JSA?
I read that.
Read that
too.
That's a dangerous book to read because that just makes me want to read
exactly.
All of it.
Stop it.
All of it.
Just,
all of it.
And there's a new Justice Society book coming out with Jeff Johns, and it looks like it's going to be really good. And just
I heard something about that of a new or a character. I don't know if you want to even talk about who's supposedly in that.
Well, there's
a new one.
Not sure which one you're.
Well, the new Dr. Manhattan. Is that what I read?
Oh, that's going to be a different. That comes out off the heels of Doomsday Clock, where there's a new Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan gave his powers to a child, and they're going to call him the Watchman.
Okay. I thought I read that was in this JSA book that's coming out. See, I don't know what's going on in comics right now, so forgive me for that. But this will be edited out.
No, we'll keep. No,
it won't.
No, we'll keep
I'm like an idiot. Thanks a lot.
We're gonna put it on loop.
I don't need that. I don't need that. Nobody wants that.
That JSA book that when it's like the new Golden Age or something like that.
It was the Golden Age one shot, and then there's a new Justice Society of America book. Yeah, and Mikhail Hanin is doing the artwork. Speaking of one of those newer artists in the past, well, not new. He's been around for a bunch of years, but is really like good. He did the Grayson series with Tom King and Tim Seeley. He did some Batman issues with Tom King, and he's just got a really interesting style. You know?
Yeah, I liked the Grayson series.
Yeah,
the art in that very much.
Yeah. But that JSA book, man, just takes you back to.
That's what got me into JSA. That run. I mean, that was right when Mike and I were writing Crusaders.
It's 1999.
He's the one that started planting the seed with that stuff. Because he always liked Alan Scott.
Yeah,
so
he sure did.
We were talking about this stuff, and I was like, I don't know any of these things, and. I did read in some Infinity Inc., back in the day, and did read some of that stuff like that, but never got into it. And then he kept talking about it, and then I started checking some things out, and I really got into it. And obviously this took off. So,
jeez, yeah,
same exact thing for me, Kevin. It was Mike at the Crusaders things talking about how awesome the JSA book was, and I was like, all right.
Yeah, he
and
did.
His costume at first Halloween party at my old house was Golden Age Green Lantern.
Yep.
He went all out. That was big secret. Yeah,
he did go all out on that. I remember him walking in because he had the Golden Lantern and everything.
Yep.
But yeah, that was his influence. But it was great. And David Goyer, and with James Robinson, like wow, what a team. Goyer was on fire at that. He was doing all kinds of stuff.
Well, it was smart because it was generational, right? Like you had Alan Scott, you had Wildcat, you had who else was a member of whoever else was on the original team?
Sandman, Wesley Dodds.
Yeah,
Sam. Or like Sandy, his sidekick, right? And then you had the era that you just mentioned, like you had the 80s era, right? You had Atom Smasher, The second generation, Black Canary. Then you went, Jay Garrick. That was the other one. Jay Garrick
Flash. Yeah.
Then you got into like the 90s with Starman, a new Hawk Girl. I loved her. Hourman, the new Android Hourman. Like, they were just really smart about if they're going to make a new JSA book, you have to span the how many decades DC Universe, how old it was at that point.
Yeah.
And then there's just a wealth of stories you can tell, because then they're like, yeah, now we're going to bring in Captain Marvel. Now we're going to make a new Johnny Thunder. Now we're going to make a new, or we're going to bring in the new Mr. Terrific that was already floating around, and the new Dr. Midnight that was already floating. And that Dr. Midnight character, he was awesome.
Yeah.
He was.
Yeah, he was.
It was like a one-shot, wasn't it, or something that they did?
He had a 3-issue series by Matt Wagner.
That's what it was. That's what it was. Matt Wagner did that. I loved that. That's what really sucked me in. And I started dabbling in this, and then I picked up that, and I was like, all right, I'm in. And
yeah.
Oh, and I love that came out of this was the 24-issue Hourman series. That was phenomenal.
That was really good. I just read that in the past 5 years. Finally read all of it, and that Rags Morales artwork, that just quirky story. You got the new Stargirl in this, and everything. I just saw Black Adam, and there was small little things in there that I was like, oh. You could trace that all the way back to that JSA series, when he actually had a team that had Atom Smasher. It had a Hawkman character. It wasn't Hawkman; it was Northwind. But and it had the 3 triangle symbols like Kondak has in the movie, and I was like, there it is. That goes all the way back to that. It's so cool.
Yeah, that's what got me into all that stuff. So I liked Black Adam when they had, he came out, and I liked his origin. I didn't, because I didn't know much about him. I didn't know much about Black Adam and the whole basis in Egypt and all that stuff. That sucked me all in there. It was good stuff. I always liked Black Adam.
They used him well, and then, and then, you can't, the Alan Davis artwork.
Yeah.
Oh, and I really loved that they put Black Canary on the team, because she was.
Oh, I do too.
The Justice League member up to that point, but it just made sense, right?
Was she in Birds of Prey at that point when this came out?
Yeah, I think. Yeah. It just made sense because of her mother, and it was a smart move because she could be like the liaison between the two. It made sense. It's like, it's just so. And I love that at some point, I think she even says it just feels right for her to be on that team. She feels almost like she's at home, Yeah, that was a dangerous issue.
Well,
to read.
Yeah.
So right around this time, and I was trying to check the dates on my phone. I know you had Starman by James Robinson, the Golden Age 4-issue miniseries. You had this and to tie with this story in a little bit, you had Kingdom Come, which sort of played with Wesley Dodds, and then what happens with him in this, all of that coming together, and just, this is a dangerous rabbit hole to start going down to read all that.
Yeah, and we actually did footnotes on. Actually, we also did it on the Secret Files that came before this. But for the first 12 issues of this series, so we really dug into this.
Yeah,
back in the day.
Because I know it was. Geez, Pants, you have an Hourman page too. Jeez.
Yes, number 1.
My God.
Jeez.
But we knew.
Pants just can't let me have my glory. I got that one page we talked about. He's firing off pages, pages.
That's right. I have my Starman page.
I have a Starman page too.
Yeah.
But we knew that everybody liked that. It was a favorite among us, so that's why I think we pulled the trigger on it.
And that was Brian Deemer, if I'm not mistaken. That was your big entrance into DC stuff back then, wasn't it?
The
The JSA book.
Yeah, probably. I can't remember when did his Flash run? Was that after his JSA run, Jeff Johns Flash, or was it before?
That
it was
been before.
God, that's a good question.
I thought that
Because I read that Flash run and loved it, and so I don't remember if like I was already reading Flash, and then when Mike was like, "You got to read JSA," I was like, "Okay," or if I read JSA and then went, "Ooh, let me read more," and then got into the Flash run. I don't remember which.
Yeah,
what the sequence was.
It was almost right at the same time, actually.
Oh, really?
In 2000, Jeff Johns redefined the Flash.
Yep, and he had just gotten on the JSA book around that time too. So yeah.
So yeah, but Jeff Johns, like, then what else did he do after that? Like, I was just reading all of his stuff, and then I was reading so many DC books and hardly any Marvel, and then 52 happened, and then like it all went down here because they they basically paused all of the stuff that I loved, and then by the time 52 was over, it was like, I don't care anymore. I'm on other things now, right? Like, it was out of my brain, and so then I never really got back, other than like stuff we would talk about on the show or a certain run or whatever. But like the days of me being a DC fanatic were over,
That's a huge chunk, though. That's almost 6 years, 5-6 years.
Yeah, it was. I was reading a lot of stuff. Yeah.
That's a good 6 years too. Like a good time frame of stories.
Hawkman,
but it's just crazy
Titans.
to me. Yeah. It was just crazy to me how the idea behind these big events is to draw in readership, and all they did for me was just cut me off at the knees and went, "Every book you love is now temporarily canceled." Ha ha. I was like, okay, thanks.
I did really enjoy 52. But what they tried after that, what happened after that?
Well, that also was that timing makes sense though too, because that's when Civil War started, right around the same time, and that's when Marvel finally, I remember I was talking about like how, because DC was on a roll from whatever Wizard World Chicago convention we went to, like in the early 2000s. There was like or maybe it was Wizard World Philly. There was a Dan DiDio panel about, this new DC, blah, 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 blah. And then because of that whole like 2 years worth of story going into Infinite Crisis in 52. And then that's when Marvel was like, oh shit, we got to do something. And they did Civil War.
Yeah.
And then their whole line of books, because we did have Bendis up to that point. But that was like kind of like there wasn't much at Marvel that was like singing. But then once they got Civil War, Joe Quesada, or once they saw what was happening, Joe Quesada was like, okay, well, all right, let's get this shit going. Yeah. When was Straczynski on Amazing Spider-Man? He was already writing.
Oh yeah, that was right. I love that run too.
Yeah.
They did the 9/11 issue. That was in the middle.
So that's 2001.
Yeah, that was late 90s. Started on that.
Yeah, but as a
Peter,
whole,
was that his whole Ezekiel story? That first,
yeah,
Moreland and all that. Yeah,
Peter, you mentioned Infinite Crisis, and I will like never forget when you read that one issue. We were already in the house, like getting ready to do a podcast, and so you went back into the studio to read the issue before and you got to the end of the issue and you were like, oh my God, wow! You were like screaming, you come running out, you in the kitchen waiting to be done. It was like, oh man, Tyler actually reminded me about that not that long ago. Remember that day Peter read that one comic and was freaking out in the other room?
Pants, you don't have the artwork for that, do you?
No, but my friend John has the art for the page before the big reveal.
Jesus.
He really does. I couldn't believe he's got that.
That was
he did the covers, right?
Who's that?
Who did the art for that? Who was that?
Well, Jimenez did the interiors, and
Jim Lee and Perez.
And it was Jim Lee and Perez on the covers. That for each issue.
You're thinking of Identity Crisis with Mike.
That's
Turner.
right. That's what. Yeah.
That was probably the last time that there's I can remember a few comics where I sort of went bonkers. Like I remember driving to Golden Eagle at the fairgrounds when Identity Crisis #7 came out, when the last issue came out, because I was like, I gotta fucking know what
I was going every week to get it. Yeah,
you know. And then
every month.
That Identity, the end of Infinite Crisis #1, because now, how many years later, it's like everything is Crisis now. So it's like that was the first time DC really went back to the well, really went back to the well with the same characters, whatever. But the other one was, and Pants, I know you have this issue, was that Sinestro Corps War one shot.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
And I remember at the time people were really pissed because they were like, we didn't know this was going to be this major. And I just remember thinking, how did you not know? Like, I remember reading the previews for that going, this is going to blow people's minds. I didn't know what was actually in the issue.
Yeah.
So we get it. And then I remember Pants rolling up one day in the studio and he's like, guess what I have? I was like, put your balls away. Like, how dare you show off like that? He comes rolling in with that. Or just like the Mr. Mindish, the page. I was like, Jesus Christ. Swinging
I got that down at Heroes Con when I think we were all down there.
But I only
Skyver directly, yeah.
I only saw it at the studio, I think. I remember you whipped it out because we were just like, whoa. I was blown away. I was like, damn.
It's actually framed in the next room.
To be surprised by comics again.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Don't you wish
he turned out to be such a jackass
really?
douchebag. Yeah.
I always want to go back to listen to that episode just to see if there's like hints of it back then, because we didn't know, We didn't know what was going on. This actually made me think, I thought of this. If you could be a kid again, but not when you were a kid.
Yeah.
What era or what year of comics would you want to be that sweet spot golden age? You can't pick your own, though. So like I couldn't pick, my first year was 1982. I can't pick like the early 80s. I would have to pick something totally different. Like what era would you want to be a kid for comics?
I'd want to go back to when like I started with superhero comics. It was really Justice League in '86. So I'd want to go back to like late 60s, early 70s, like the Neil Adams, Jim Steranko kind of stuff when that was groundbreaking. And reading that for the first time, going from what was more kid-friendly, simplistic kind of comics to, oh my God, look at what they're doing now, and my mind being blown away by that. Like Gwen Stacy's death, that kind of stuff that you would just be reading normal comics, and they'll never do that, and all of a sudden, oh my God, they did that. Like that. I think that would be cool to grow up in that era.
Sort of like the what do they say? It's when fans sort of took over Marvel, like everybody after Stan, like the Roy Thomases and Steve Engleharts and Marv Wolfman and all these people who grew up reading comics finally took over. That's interesting. 70s Marvel would be really interesting to.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm leaning towards. I was trying to decide, would it be better to go back or imagine being 12 when Image was happening? Like your whole brain would explode, right? Like
that's exactly what I was.
Well, I mean, I was like 18 when that happened, so that exploded enough.
But cool. I mean, just think about the difference between a 12-year-old brain and an 18-year-old brain. Like that's a big difference, I don't know.
I'll go back to the Marvel Age of Comics in like 1961. Buy all the comics, read them once, keep them pristine, and then sell them years later for beaucoup bucks, baby.
So you're doing the Back to Future Sports Almanac thing.
No, but I mean, just to read the Marvel, everybody who I read in the past, like interviews, things like when the Marvel stuff hit, it just blew their mind because DC was kind of stayed and, not wrote in it, but the Marvel exploding with FF and Spider-Man and Hulk and the Avengers and Thor and Daredevil, and it was happening back then.
Yeah, but if you were
just to try to get that experience to see like just like, oh, this next issue comes out and it's
Yeah.
If you were 12 in 1961, you'd be 73 now.
No, I'm an old soul. What can I tell you? I was born 20 years too late.
Well, I couldn't put the 70s because that's when my Marvel was. I mean,
yeah.
I started in the early 70s and all that Marvel stuff. So I loved all that. So I can't pick that. So it was like, that's why I was thinking like you. I was like, wonder what it'd be like if I was a kid when in the 90s and Image took off and all. And I was like, well, that'd be kind of cool in a way to. But I immediately then was like, no, I'd much rather would go back to 62 and be like a kid and just, getting comics off the rack and like, oh, what's this, and
the only other time I could think about would be, and this is really going back and not necessarily because of the stories, but because of what my dad said one time. So my dad was born in 40. And I know he talked about in the first 5 to 10 years of his life, he was reading some Action comic books off the rack. I mean, so you're talking about really early Action comic stuff.
Yeah.
I would love to have been like a kid in the candy store picking that off the shelf and running into my dad, being friends, trading comic books back then. That would have been cool. Because he says, I can remember reading those and having those for a few years at least before they got destroyed, thrown out, whatever. That would have been cool too, because he remembered the awe of, wow, this is really cool for him as a kid in the 40s.
There's those great pictures of like from that era of like a little kid in front of a comic rack, and there's just hundreds of titles,
yeah. That would be cool.
I'm sort of torn between, wonder what it would have been like to be a late 90s kid, like Heroes Return for Marvel and Marvel Knights, and DC was like this JSA series, that could be an interesting time because comics were really good and they were coming out of the crazy 90s, and that could be an interesting time to be a kid again, because that's when I think I got rejuvenated anyway. And then the other one, just because I think I would want to torture myself, is I think it would be funny to see, I wonder what it would have been like to be a kid during the New 52 and how just, because like we knew what it was like because we were jaded and, the premise of it was such an interesting time, and then the execution, fell through. But what would have, there are people who grew up with those books who love those books,
Sure.
Like, I wonder what that would have been like.
That's no different than people who grew up with the prequels as their first Star Wars movies, 99, to 2000, 3, 5, whatever it was. And like I have one friend who loves that stuff, and he's my kid's age. It's a coworker, and he that's his favorite Star Wars, and I like them, but I can't fathom that. That just
it's painful.
Yeah.
I think about like if you're a kid now and you're like getting into comics for whatever reason, there's how intimidating is it? Like there's so much content. Like where do you start? Like it was already intimidating in 1985 or whatever when I was getting started, and Fantastic Four, Captain America, whatever, in the 200-300s or whatever, 400, whatever issues they were at. And it was like, oh my God, I'm missing so much story, right? But now it's like, oh, it's only issue 17, but it's volume 17. And it's like, where do you, like, you look at the back issues and there's so much, and there's 800 different Batman titles, and you're like, I don't even know what's up. And it was like, there were 2 Batman titles when I started reading, and then like Legends of the Dark Knight came out. That was like a big deal because it was a 3rd Batman title. Oh my God, right? And now it's like, how many? I don't even know. You can't even count that high, right? So I feel like it's like intimidating to be a new reader, but maybe they just don't even care because it's just like it's so overwhelming that you're just like, I'll just read whatever's in front of me, and you just buy something off the rack. I don't know.
I think there's some of that they just don't care because it's right there, and they also have a lot more resources to figure out maybe a good place to start.
Oh, that's true.
Than what we did.
Yeah,
I mean, we relied on comic shops, friends, and maybe a previews magazine if you were lucky to get one back then and think about it. But now you just Google something. If you're watching a Marvel movie in the theater, you just go home and Google Marvel movie this comics related. Boom, you've got to get hits on what you could read or what it's based on. So they might have an easier time in that capacity.
It's true. That's true.
You were reading some 4-issue miniseries and you missed out on the 4th issue and nobody had back issues. You're screwed for years.
You couldn't.
Like, I don't know how that ends.
That happened with me, Sword of Azrael #3. I missed it somehow. and it took me forever to find it till I read 3 and 4 then.
Well, that was like me with Death in the Family. Buying it off the rack from Walden Books in the mall and missed issue 3 because it sold out so fast, and then it turned out to be the big deal issue, and then I had to get it at Golden Eagle, like the 3rd printing of it or something, so because I wasn't going to pay $40 or whatever for or $80, whatever that was, immediately after it was off the shelf. It's like, oh man,
I didn't read that issue until it came out in the very first trade paperback, which I still have, and I know it wasn't long after that came out. It wasn't like 10 or 15 years, but that's when I first read issue 3 and then 4.
I feel like I have that trade, and I don't know why I would have bought that trade if I had gotten all the issues. So it might have been the same, but I feel like I got like a 3rd printing of the issue, but maybe I never did. Maybe I just bought that trade like you did.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah.
Because I feel like they rushed that to print.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah. I think so too.
I bought it at like a Walden Books. It was thin. It was like only like $5 or something. It was
because it was just those 4 issues, right?
Yeah, it was cheap news.
It was newsprint.
It was it was definitely cheap newsprint. Yeah. And then it had the phone number in the back page somewhere that showed you what it was.
Well, did you see, Brian? DC now on the app, they're going to 1 month between new releases and digital.
I saw that only if you're an Ultra subscriber, so you got to up your tier. But $99
that's introductory.
I mean, I actually just did it while we were talking because I'm I gotta not having the app and not being able to read these issues we're talking about. It's just killing me, right? So I'm like, now I want to read this Superman Batman. I've been wanting to read this Batgirl series for like a year now because it looks so cool. I love the artwork, so I'm like, I got to read that, and I just never got the trade or anything, and I'm like, forget the trade, I'm just gonna get the app. So
I mean, $100 introductory price,
and that's until you cancel it.
That's
year to year.
No, it says in the fine print it will renew at the current rate. So if they make it $150 next year, I will renew for $150, not for $99.
Because I think it's supposed to be what, $120.
I think it's supposed to be 120.
Yeah.
120 even. I spend anywhere from like 50 to 75 a month on my DCBS order, and that's not all DC. But I now can, if I stop getting a whole bunch of titles, it'll even out. I'll actually be saving money.
Yeah,
even at 120.
That's why I signed up for both the Marvel and the DC one a couple of years ago, was just to stop getting a huge amount of current books and just, I still get a couple.
Yeah,
I still get a dozen, but that's it. Everything else, I just wait for the app.
Yeah, I have the DC one, but I was like, boy, this will really, like, it's going to save me money in the long run. And I don't read my fucking books anyway. It's 1 month. It could be 9 months, and I still haven't read my books. So yeah. When I saw that was happening, I wanted to see what your reaction was.
By the way, that trade paperback of Death in the Family shipped on December 5th, 1988, less than a week after the final issue came out. So they did rush it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so less than a week. I mean, what the hell?
They knew.
I'm sure the comic shop I was going to at the time, which would have been that Turk's, I'm sure I had a conversation with him about missing that book, and when the trade came, I'm sure he put one aside for me, knowing I'd want to read it. That's just the stuff he did back then. Just like Golden Eagle would have anybody that I ever encountered working there.
Well, there you go.
So now that I have this, you're going to have to tell me what like recent DC stuff I should read, so I can, other than this Superman, Batman, and Batgirls. So
yeah,
I think the newest run of it's still numbered in the current run, but the newest creative team on Nightwing, I think that's been really good.
78, I think, was the
first issue? 76, 78. I forget his name. Gosh darn it.
Bruno Redondo and Tom Taylor. Tom Taylor's the writer. Yeah, Bruno Redondo.
I think that's some of the best comics I've read in a long time. If
you liked the Matt Fraction, David Aja Hawkeye, this is
similar.
It's got the same kind of vibe, more or less. I mean, it's not completely the same, but it was something that people were kind of connecting the two.
I tell you what, though, my first impression of this app is a little wonky. You go to the Batman Superman like page, and it's got the little description and all the issues, and they're not listed in numeric order. It's like the first one is number 2, and then number 1, then number 3, and it's like, hello, sort by number.
You got
what in the hell?
You got to go to series, not comics.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it depends on what it is. Like when you do a search, they show like comics.
Yeah, but I'm on the comics, like on that series page. Like it's like the I don't understand.
There's a sort and a filter down at the bottom too that might help, but it's not.
Why would it
perfect.
Not default to numeric order and then let you change it?
Yeah.
I actually sent a whole thing, and I actually just got an email back today, ironically, from Marvel, because I sent a calmly but sternly worded email to Marvel app saying, like, you guys, like, you got to fix your shit because comic readers care about this stuff. And like, because it's like in the Marvel app, once you start reading something, it's always in like you're up next, and it's like you can't remove anything from that. And I'm like, I said, guys, like comic readers start and stop reading things all the time. And when we stop reading things, we don't want to see it anymore because it reminds us of the money we wasted on comics that we'll never read. So like, get it off. I want to remove it from my list. How can I remove it from my list? I can't. There's no way to remove it from this list. And it's driving me crazy because I don't want to read that series anymore. And they were like, well, thank you for your, we know, like, we're all of our things. It's like, don't give me this form letter bullshit. I gave you real critique. Let's implement it.
Now, I will warn you, Brian, for the DC app, you download books to your iPad. You carry it around for a while. You may or may not read it for a week or two. The certificate that holds that book when you're offline will kind of expire until you connect back to the internet and renew it. But it seems like a shorter time frame than anything else I've ever encountered. No. I'll download it, not touch it for a few days, go somewhere, open it out. It's like, you need to reconnect. I'm like, I'm in the middle of nowhere. That's why I brought this. Damn it.
Well, I don't know if Fables is on there, but you should probably read Fables because you like Fables. Yeah.
Well, I will probably buy the trade for that because like I have the entire thing in trade. So
if you like Bendis too, right?
Oh yeah.
I liked his Young Justice run that he did.
I read that in issues and all his Superman stuff, which I actually mostly enjoyed. You know, the one title was better than the other. I feel like Superman was better than Action, maybe, or maybe I don't know, whatever. One was better than the other.
Yeah. If you like Christopher Priest, he's writing Black Adam.
Yeah.
It's okay. You know, you read the first issue. You know, if you like it, you like it. I sent you. I don't know if you saw when I sent you. If you have the Marvel app, everybody should read that Kang the Conqueror miniseries. It's so good. It's his origin story. It's sort of like a newer version of his origin story with a little bit of a twist. I really, really liked it a lot. And the artwork is really good too.
Oh, if you like Batman the Animated Series, they do have season 1 and 2 out of like a continuation of the comic of the cartoon. Batman Adventures season 1 and season 2. I think there's 6 or 7 issues each, and then there's a third one coming out in the next couple months. But it's set in that Batman animated universe. That I read the first series and it was really good.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for what else, because there's some stuff that's from the last past 2, 3, 4 years that's better than what's coming out now. Which is always happens, you know. Like there's some books that I would say stay away from. But then you could read like Gotham City Year One by Tom King and Phil Hester.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which takes place like 2 generations before Batman even existed. So it's got Slam Bradley and
Bruce Wayne's grandfather's in it or something.
His grandparents are in it. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah,
I like that kind of stuff.
And I think that's already on the app, like the first issue.
Oh. Cool. And then real quick, Andor is the best Star Wars.
I wanted to talk to you about that.
I mean, oh my
Man.
God.
I can't believe we only have one more episode to go.
I know.
Yep.
Holy shit. Fabulous.
It's so the fucking speech that Stellan Skarsgård gave like in episode 10. I mean, it's like one of the best speeches in cinematic history, and it's in a Star Wars TV show. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh.
I mean, I'm not kidding, Peter. This is no hyperbole. Like that speech gives like Shakespeare a run for its money. Did you watch it?
No, I'm not caught up on any of that, but I keep seeing people talk about it, and that's,
oh my God, I was watching it. And I'm just like,
fabulous.
This is Star Wars. Like, this is like what? We're listening to Star Wars right now, and I was like completely mesmerized, going, "What am I even watching?"
And you really see how sadistic the Empire can be.
Oh
boy. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's brilliant.
It really,
and then his fucking spaceship in episode 11, Shane, when he does the he does the thing. It was like, what is the so cool.
Yeah.
What did you say, Kevin?
I said, so it's as good as Phantom Menace, is what you're saying?
Oh my God.
Just a little bit better. Just a tad.
Yeah. Just a scotch.
I watched Mandalorian, but I have not watched Andor yet.
I love Mandalorian. But this really is giving it a run for its money.
Everybody says
it's a whole other level. Yeah.
Yeah, I keep hearing the same.
It's so serious. It's like not a kid's show, right?
No.
It's not that it's not safe for kids, and they would probably be bored because there's just like a lot of people talking a lot of the time.
And it's
good.
It really gives you a slow build. And it's not that it's boring, it's that I'm impatient because I want to see what they do.
Yeah.
But they are taking their time to get it to you. God, God. Yeah. Fabulous.
It's, we used to say about like with comics, it's like, it's sort of my argument about like, I want, even though it's geek TV, I really do appreciate when some of them, it doesn't have to be all of them, but when some of them that are trying to be serious actually get the creative team behind it to make it like it's must-watch TV. Like I think there's a part of people who create this content that know that they're always going to get people to watch this stuff, right? So they're like, it doesn't always have to be amazing. And I'm the one sitting here going like I saw Black Adam and I was like, why couldn't that have been better? Like, why does it just have to entertain? Like, I know that there are things that people want, they just want their popcorn movies and blah, 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 blah. But I'm like, don't you feel, especially those of us who are comic book fans, and look, we just sat here talking about Frank Miller's Daredevil and Byrne on Fantastic Four. Like, why do we always just sort of accept, oh, but I had fun. Oh, but I enjoyed it. But it's so disposable sometimes that like that's what pisses me off. It's like I want this shit to be good because I want people to see that these ideas of why like a show like Umbrella Academy, or my sister watches Lock and Key and she loves it, like this shit comes from comics. The shit that we used to be made fun of for decades, these ideas are there. They've been there. We've been enjoying them for so long. Like, make these shows good. I want every show to be like Andor, even if it is comedy. Even if it is comedy, I want it to be the best comedy. Like She-Hulk was like that. I was like, I see what they're going for, but it still felt safe. Like, stop being fucking safe. Like do it. Like, so I'm glad that Andor's like that because I want people. I like that, you see people like, God, I can't believe I'm watching a Star Wars show. It's like, no, it should just, they make a fucking ton of money. Stop making shit TV shows,
Yeah.
So, sorry, that's my soapbox.
Obi-Wan was like that. It was like that show, like we waited, they got Ewan McGregor, and basically that show sucked. I mean, it had some interesting moments in it, but in the grand scheme of things, it was pretty pathetic.
They just fed it to you. They just
it was not.
I loved seeing Ewan McGregor again play it. I loved Hayden Christensen being back in it, and like you said, Brian, they had some interesting parts, but
then Andor is like Disney, start like it feels like every couple of weeks they announce like another Star Wars movie is canceled, like that they did have in the pipeline. Yeah. And then after watching Andor, I'm like, I don't even care. If you give me one show a year that's as good as Andor, I mean, it's almost 12 hours of incredible content. Like that's 4 long Star Wars movies, like, or 6, like, I'm fine with it. Cancel all the Star Wars movies and just give me this once a year.
Look at the Star Wars movies that came out prior to this. I mean, they most of them were mediocre in my opinion, and then you had a couple that were, decent. But I was just like, who cares? Now all of a sudden, this content is excelling. They're excelling at it. I think it's great. I don't think you should. It's kind of like, I realize it's different format, but I mean, it to me, it's like it shouldn't be viewed that way. Like you said, you're doing 4 movies, in a series. What's the difference? But I think have some sort of probability that it allows for this to happen. You know what I mean? So if they didn't have these serials that they're now producing on these shows, what would they be doing with the Star Wars franchise? Because the movies weren't that great. So.
When they're selling a lot
movie, you know what I mean? So I think this format actually allows them to, and it turning out, that it's changing the perspective that you think the movies are the grandest thing, and now we're getting the experience that it doesn't have to be in the theater, that we can get these experiences. And we for a while, but
I would rather most of these geek properties be TV shows, not movies.
Because TV rules.
It gives you the ability to build to it.
Yeah, you can really expand and you can tell creative things, and you can each episode can build and you don't have to rush. There was so much. I'm not comparing Andor to Black Adam, no, but like that's what I felt about Black Adam. Like there's no development in these characters, right? Because you don't have time to develop anything, like that's what I feel the most is missing is development and why should I care about these characters in anything, in any movie, if I don't have an established something to, to build upon? And that's what TV can do.
Yeah.
Especially with DC movies, I really think that they're missing the boat on something that makes them that you want to care about them. Like the new Batman movie's fine. I watched it. I enjoyed it. Slow paced, more detective driven. Fine. It was better than I ever thought it would be. But I think with like Black Adam and stuff, I think they're missing the boat on something yet. There's just something that doesn't feel right about them when they make it. It's missing a spark that I think Marvel just excels at right now.
Yeah. I mean, I also don't want to go the Marvel method and do 20 movies before, you finally get the payoff. Like, I don't want that either.
No. And that's what I appreciated about, at least they were trying to do something a little different with Batman, Superman, with Justice League. I appreciate the effort, but it just fell short overall.
Yeah, but no, like I said, I see people on Twitter all the time talk about Andor, and I'm looking forward to watching it, but I'm still stuck on Clone Wars. I got a long way.
Clone Wars is good. I love Rebels. The first season's a little rough to get through, but I loved everything that came after Rebels. I like Bad Batch well enough. I'm excited for the next season of that. Mandalorian's good. Obi-Wan was lackluster. I'm excited for Ahsoka too. That's a character that I couldn't stand in the Clone Wars cartoon, but loved her in, I don't want to say, in whatever she showed up next in, and then realized some other connections that they made and things they've done with that character since then. And I really, really like that character.
Yeah, there's that's the danger of having too much content. We get sort of dulled by, we get so much of it that you're like, when you do get something that's really good, then you go back and you go, oh wait, some of that other stuff actually wasn't that good. It's just we're being fed like, give me the next thing, give me the next thing, and it's 90s comics, right? The glut of comics, and then everything is disposable, because you're like, doesn't mean anything. And then when
they're
you find,
phasing it out now too, which because the streaming services, they used to just dump everything, and then you like zombies, and you sit there and watch all of it at one shot.
oh right, and space it out.
Yeah, now you're every Marvel's even doing it. They're all doing it, so they paces you out, so it gives you a chance to catch it if you can't catch it when it comes out, and digest it and enjoy it.
Well, Warner Brothers and Discovery saying, well, we've got a 10-year plan. I'm thinking, get your ass in gear. I'm 50. 10 years is 60. Come on.
I'm not going to last that much longer. Can you make it a 3-year plan? Come on.
Yeah. Give me something quicker, please.
Speaking of, all right.
Watch episode 1 of Andor, Peter. Come on.
Yeah, and even that's the worst one. And that's not saying it's bad, but if I got to compare them all, that's the one that's hard to get through, and then boom, it goes off.
I mean, each one builds and builds and builds.
Yeah,
and builds. It's just
Maybe
I don't even know what we're going to get on this 12th episode. I can't.
Oh my god! I thought that there were a couple more after this, and I was talking at work about it, and I looked on the phone, and I'm like, oh my god, there's only one more. What? How are they going to tie all this up? What?
Kevin, what'd you say, Kevin?
I just said maybe I'll try one before Thanksgiving, but it might be better. It might be more realistic. I won't be able to check it out until after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that actor's name? What's his name? Stellan
Skarsgård.
Yeah, when he was in Chernobyl. I don't know if you ever saw Chernobyl.
I didn't see Chernobyl.
Holy shit, is that?
Oh, I love that.
Oh, is that dark? Don't watch it when you're depressed. I mean, just
good to know.
I started watching that.
It's fantastic,
and he's so good in that because he's such a good actor.
He's so good. Yeah.
But talk about a mini series that just fucked with my head by the time I was done with it. I was like, oh my god, this is some of the shit you see and just what they had to go through. And
what's that?
Watch
HBO.
Okay.
If you want to have your head fucked with, you watch the Jeffrey Dahmer Netflix series.
I just started that.
I'm not going to do that.
It's so good.
Everybody said, I had a couple other people that said it was good. So I watched, because they have the documentary series and the other series. So I watched the documentary series first to kind of refresh my memory of the whole incident, which I even after watching the first episode, I was like, wow, I don't remember all that,
Yeah, so, I didn't know any of this. Yeah.
So I want now I want to actually go back and now start the series. I think it's 10 parts.
Yeah, it's 10 parts. Yeah, apparently the guy who plays him is so brilliant, and apparently he's in a lot of therapy right now because it really messed with him.
Wow,
trying to play that character of all characters. I mean, my God.
It's Quicksilver, right?
Quicksilver from the X-Men.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that's him.
I did. Oh, Brian, I did sign up yesterday for a 3-month trial on Apple TV to watch For All Mankind.
Oh, yes. And if you end up with...
And Lasso, yeah.
Yeah, Ted Lasso. And then the morning show is freaking exceptional, too. So if you have time and you want to check it out, they got some great shows.
Let's watch For All Mankind for at least the first episode for next time, because I really am interested in that, because it's Ronald Moore. I mean, come on,
all right. I'll mark that down.
Yeah. I want to watch that one too.
Cool.
All right.
I think it's his best show so far, but anyway, we'll talk about it then.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's they don't have it anywhere else. So, it's just Apple.
No, it's just Apple TV.
Yeah,
the first episode is free on iTunes.
Oh.
I do remember that. I just didn't want to do it and then get hooked. So I just decided once I was reminded on my TV downstairs that I have a 3-month free trial. I'm like, let's hit that because Thanksgiving's coming up and I'm going to have some time.
Maybe do that then. They've been filming a Apple Plus show, Apple TV show here. Second season of Ballers. I don't know
I haven't heard of that one.
I forget the basketball player, but it's his show. I don't know if it's about him, but I know it's his show. LeBron James.
Right. Okay.
But they're literally in the apartment building I have, we have Bookbinders Restaurant in the bottom, and they were filming there one night, and 2-3 blocks behind me up in Churchill. They were filming, during the days and stuff. So
cool.
Apparently, the first.
Oh, that's cool.
I think the first series was filmed here as well. So that makes me curious because I like kind of seeing that. So because the other Hulu show with Michael Keaton, the Dope Sick, a lot of that.
Oh yes, I want to see that too.
Richmond too. So I want to check that kind of stuff out. But
the other one, Apple's had a lot of good shows. The show with Elizabeth Moss, the woman from Handmaid's Tales and
West Wing,
Mad Men, and she has a show on Apple TV Plus, which is phenomenal. It's a really, I don't want to give it. I just watch it because I don't know how to say anything without like spoiling it.
Okay.
Just watch it and let that thing wash over you. Tasha and I had no idea what to expect, and the first 2 episodes we were like, that was really good, but it's a little creepy, I don't know. And then by the end we were like, oh my god, can we watch one more? It was so good. So yeah, that woman is a powerhouse, man. She can act. So anyway,
all right,
Apple TV. All right,
yeah, let's be done.
Okay. We should maybe do an intro.
Let's do an intro.